you doing, wrestling fans? And welcome to another edition of John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast, the only wrestling podcast that brings you back 30 years with vintage audio featuring some of the biggest names of that time. The Pro Wrestling Spotlight covered all the news stories and breaking developments that happened in real time, and now we relive those moments right here on this podcast. Today, we will review the April 3rd, 1993 Pro Wrestling This Week program, which aired on 1440 WNYG in Babylon, New York. Unfortunately, we don't have a tape of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight evening show from that day on WEVD. The tape was blank when I tried to upload it for this show, so we only have one show to review from that day. However, on tonight's show or today's show or whenever you're listening to this, so we are bringing back Broadway Sonny Blaze, as we wanted to dive deep into the Bubba or Bully Ray Dudley history with him and why he hates both of us so much, at least is our speculation we'll be discussing tonight. Sonny is going to be joining us shortly. I want to thank everybody who is a patron to this show. Patreon.com/John Arezzi. $5 a month gets you in the door. And for that level of membership, you get the entire catalog of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight shows. You get this podcast early. You get our video podcast early. You get the complete, unedited, original radio broadcast from 30 years ago. And if you want to have more content, more bonuses, more exclusive features, the opportunity to come on this program, all you got to do is just go to patreon.com/John Arezzi. Check out all the levels, and you will find one that's suitable for you. And you could be anywhere from a friend of the show to a super fan to an associate producer, or executive producer. That's patreon.com/John Arezzi. I also want to plug my upcoming appearance at 80s WrestleCon, and that's going to take place on May 6th, a Saturday, in New Jersey. Doors open at 11 a.m. It's going to be at the Menon Sports Arena in Morristown, New Jersey. And a whole slew of 80s wrestling stars are going to be there, highlighted by Bret the Hitman Hart, and so many others. Go to 80swrestlingcon.com to see everyone who's attending and for more information. So I look forward to seeing everybody up there in New Jersey in just about 4 weeks. Right now, I'd like to bring on Marsh, our producer and creative director, who is coming to us direct from the infirmary in Arizona.
I don't know. I feel like I should get like a background of like little heart monitors and stuff.
Yeah, you need to definitely have a nurse there with you, I would think.
Well, I got better than a nurse. I got Dr. Medusa telling me to go out and get all these random, just oil of oregano, black seed oil. It was just tons of oils.
Yeah, we have a photo we'll pull up in just a bit, but I want to ask you, I mean, how you were at WrestleCon, you were out there helping Medusa.
Yeah.
So give us kind of a overview of your experience at WrestleMania weekend in Los Angeles.
It's the closest I've ever been to a WrestleMania, honestly. The most connected I've ever been to the business, and still was not able to get in, not for a chance, not for a second. But it's always kind of neat. But it was my first WrestleCon as well. I've never been to the week of it all. I had a friend out there going to as many shows as they could. I had several, and I barely saw them because just there was so much stacked. But for me, my primary focus was making sure that Medusa was taken care of in every way that we could do, right?
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Bret Hart, because that was one of my favorite things I got to witness. Was she walks up to Bret, hasn't seen him in a long time. He didn't recognize her at first, and she goes, "It's me, Medusa." And he goes like, "Oh my God, Alundra," and like reaches his hand out and then starts talking to her. And I was like, after we left, I was like, "Wait, did you work with him at all prior to the WWF run that you had?" She was like, "I don't think so." And I was like, "I think he just knows you as Alundra. Like, even though he went to WCW after, and that's where they really spent the most time, the Alundra thing." That was just cool to see, because everyone calls her Medusa.
Yeah. I never liked that name Alundra anyway for her.
She told me, and I'm pretty positive it's in the book, just a Cliff Notes version of it. More or less, she picked AB initials, Alundra Blaze, so she'd be the first in every program.
Oh, there you go. She's always thinking that one, and
So
we did
smart.
have some text conversation. She's doing her NWA stuff this week, and
Yes.
next week we're going to be reviewing her show, the 30th anniversary of her first appearance here on Pro Wrestling Spotlight, and she said she'll be joining us for that. So I'm pretty excited about that.
It's going to be awesome. And you guys overlap in a lot more ways than just having known each other. I got to meet George Napolitano at WrestleCon because he made his way to the table to see her.
Yeah.
And as soon as he walked up, I was like, oh my God, that's George. Guys, George. Like, I was freaking out because.
Legend.
Yeah. Yeah, I took a picture with him. It's very Forrest Gump.
Yeah, you sent that to me. That's right. You did. That was cool.
I take the worst selfies because I'm not thinking about like reprints or anything like that. It's just for me to capture a moment real quick. As I was going through them after the fact, over half of them, the other person's got their eyes closed or it's blurry. And I was like, they're not going to like that I'm going to post it, but I'm gonna. Like,
well, George is great.
So nice.
Just really a mentor for me and opened up so many doors for me back from the 70s, 90s. I mean, he texted me. Also, I really want to bring him on the show, and he's hard to get a hold of sometimes, but hopefully we'll bring him on really, really soon in the future. And he's just amazing individual and one of my dearest friends. So, I mean, WrestleMania, for the most part, it was very busy for you.
Very busy to do the stuff, but there was only a couple things I really wanted to do, and they happened. So can't complain one bit. And I got to watch, I wasn't there live, but got to go there. Tim White in the Hall of Fame, Andy Kaufman in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't have booked it better myself. So
yeah, and that Hall of Fame induction speech by Conan.
Yes.
Was incredible. And Ray, that was just such a feel good. That was my best feel good moment watching all weekend. I loved WrestleMania, both nights. I thought the pageantry, the spectacle that it is, and the matches for the most part, I think all of them performed, and they did a bang up job for that. But yeah, the Conan and Ray, that was so heartfelt, so genuine, so real. And although my name wasn't mentioned, it was kind of like Conan talked about the Singapore trip where Paul Heyman was on there, and that's when he met Conan for the first time, and that started the wheels in motion for what eventually became the invasion of the Luchadors into ECW. So that was kind of cool. But it was just feel good. It was feel good.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, you know that they still have editors on their speeches. They have to hand the speech over. WWE seeing your name and putting that red ink right down, saying, "Oh, this is all good to go." Except the
imagine, whatever. If that happened, what am I going to do? But I thought, I really thought that was all ad lib.
It was amazing. It felt heartfelt, passionate. I don't know if it was scripted. I've always been told, and I don't know. You have to write it and hand it over.
I have to say that Conan and Ray, with the respect that they have, and I think they might have let Conan just say what was in his heart. So that's what it looked like to me, because I don't know if Conan could follow a script anyway. Wow. And Ray, of course, I mean, that was just so heartfelt and so genuine, and I'm so happy for him. And it was an amazing thing to watch. I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed WrestleMania weekend. And then, of course,
it also felt amazing because it felt like part 2 of the CAC this past year, where Ray inducted Conan.
Yes.
And this felt like a part 2 where Conan's inducting Ray for the other Hall of Fame. So to me, watching it, it was just poetry.
It was. And those guys are like brothers. I mean, they really honestly are. And the stories that were told were just incredible. And two of my dearest friends, people that I love dearly, was Conan and of course Oscar Ray. Anyway, I mean, what we're going to do today is we have some cool stuff to talk about, because we never really finished what we needed to finish with Broadway Sonny Blaze. So I asked him to come back on and tell some more stories, especially about what happened in 1993 with a guy named Bully Ray or Bubba Ray. So why don't we bring Sonny on and say hello? There he is.
Hey, John, how are you? Hey, Marsh.
So happy to have you back.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
It's like the old times where here you are.
It feels like that.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, we got such a great response from last week. So many of the old listeners were so happy that you had come on the show after such a, our history goes back so many years, but it went over, man. It popped some people.
Well, that's very kind. Did any of them say that I haven't aged a day? Because please, just say
every
it.
one of them.
They said look better than ever. They said that you're in better shape now than you were then.
Yeah,
And that's not right.
And then Jack the Giant Stalker reached out. He's now in the Hall of Fame overseas.
I'm not surprised. It's bound to happen.
And Scarlett O'Hara was revealed to actually have been his wife back then.
Yeah.
Along with his other wife. So it was a really an interesting story with Jack the Giant Stalker. But that was one, and it's kind of ironic that the guys I used to do the other the Brian Last Arcadian Vanguard, the producer, and Luke Hippelman and Jason Nacarado, they were always fascinated by the Jack the Giant Stalker story, and they always wanted to know what the story was behind it. And they both of them reached out to me on Twitter. Is the story ever revealed? I said, yes, it is. So
We got it.
So the podcast is out. And for those who remember that event, that Jack the Giant Stalker deal, listen to the podcast. The answers are now there.
Now we know.
Now we certainly know. But anyway, I mean, we're here. We had such a great time with you last week, and we really never got to in our offline conversations when we were talking about Mark, and Mark's last name is LoMonaco, right?
Correct.
Long Island guy.
Yeah.
Who has become historic for not only his ring work and his career as a Hall of Famer, but also his tendency to hold a grudge or just hate people. and I think we both fell into that category of both being hated by him for different reasons. Now, I never knew what I did to the guy until I ran into him 12 years ago at a TNA event. I was backstage and I hadn't seen him for all those years. And, I'm there. I hadn't been to a show in many, many years. And I was shooting a commercial down in Orlando, Florida. And I was friends with Dixie Carter. And we happened to be on the same flight heading to Orlando. And I was shooting a commercial with Craig Morgan, a big country artist, and Bush's Beans with the dog.
Yeah.
And play that beautiful bean footage.
Yeah. With the dog, and we were taping in the Universal Studios lot. And when I saw Dixie on the plane, she was like, "Oh my God, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Orlando, shooting a commercial, and we're doing a pay-per-view. Where are you?" Universal Studios. That's where we are. Why don't you come to the show? And it so happened that the lot that they were shooting was the very next lot, like literally less than 100 feet from where we were shooting our commercial. So I got backstage, and that's
where you were invited to the show by the owner.
Yeah, by Dixie. I sat with her in the first row.
Yeah.
Wow. So she didn't know that I was John Arezzi. She thought I was John Alexander, the Nashville executive at GAC, because I had meetings with her and Jeff Jarrett when they were shopping TNA. They wanted to get on a network, and they didn't have a home for the network yet. And they met with me at GAC, Great American Country, and I didn't tell them who I was. I was John Alexander. I didn't want anyone to know I was John Arezzi in the wrestling business. But as we started talking in that meeting, they were kind of like, "Boy, you know a lot about wrestling." I was like, "Yeah, I've always loved wrestling." And anyway, the owners even though Toby Keith was involved with them at the time, the owners of GAC did not want the wrestling show on GAC. So I couldn't fulfill that. But we became friends. She, and I used to take my nephew to shows when TNA was running here in Nashville. And anyway, I went and then I saw Vince Russo for the first time. He was working over there. I hadn't seen him since our big fights. He turned pale when I just went. He was getting coffee at a coffee truck, and I saw him, and I went up to him, and I was like, "Hey, stranger, how you doing?" And he turned around, and he almost like he saw a ghost, But we had a nice conversation, and then I saw Cactus, Mick Foley, and he was like, "Oh, John, how you doing? What are you doing here?" And then I see Bubba, and I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And he's like, "Blank effing John Arezzi. What the F are you doing here?" And I thought he was ribbing me. And he started like poking at me. And I was like, what the heck? You didn't think I was good enough, or there was some type of agitation that was sparked and I didn't know what was going on. So it's a pay-per-view. It's on live TV. Mick Foley's actually doing color commentary. I'm sitting in the first row with Dixie and her husband, Serge. And during the main event, which was the Dudleys against Sting and Kurt Angle, there's a brawl outside the ring. And they start brawling in front of us. And then Bubba tells Sting, "Throw me on him." I hear it. And he does. And my chair goes back and he grabs me by the throat. And Marsh, I'll send you a picture so you could post that.
I was just starting to pull up the pay-per-view so I can maybe see how much I can dig up. But yeah.
Oh, it's there. It's there. And Mick Foley, because I was John Alexander, Mick Foley is like, "Oh my," he goes, "Bubba Ray Dudley attacking radio personality John Alexander. I guess the heat that existed 10 years ago is still there." So that's out there on pay-per-view. I could find out the specific show. It was 2000 and I think it was 2009 or 2010, something like that. But I do have the DVD, so it's out there. Believe me, it's there. Just look for a main event of Sting. Anyway, you could do that. You're a creative guy. You'll find it. And that'll be included here somehow, some way.
Nonsensical noises, when that. I'll tell you what, that's the front row seat. That guy will never want to buy again. Thrown out onto the lap of radio personality John Alexander in the front row. See, just trying to get his bearings. Some bad blood has been brewing there for a couple decades. Here comes Devo with angle. The cord from the camera.
Swinging steel chairs in the crowd in the battle with Sting. What bodies all over the place.
Now let me make sure West is on his toes. Meisterburger presided over what town? Salvertown. There you go, buddy. You're on your game. Hey, I got to ask you, what's it like being able to broadcast without having somebody screaming your headpiece? Watch those pronouns today.
There's the shot with the chair as Sting moved.
And that was it. And then, I know that the guy hates me. And I was at the Conrad Thompson event during the Ric Flair retirement weekend last year. And there were tables set up. And there were George Napolitano. We're walking around, and then there's Bubba Bully at a table, and he sees me and George is like, don't go over there. I was like, and so all of a sudden he starts yelling, "George, come here, but not effing John Arezzi, not effing John Arezzi. Don't you come here." I'm like, what the hell what's the guy's problem? And because he's co-host of the SiriusXM's Busted Open with Dave LaGreca and Mark Henry, and I've been really kind of blocked from ever doing that show because of him.
Jeez.
I'm not allowed to go on, and I'm sure I'll see Dave LaGreca at WrestleCon in May, because I saw Dave a few years back when I first did it in 2019. I had a great conversation with him. Great guy. We've been friends on Facebook and been interacted, and he did interview me when my book came out. LaGreca did, but it never aired. It never aired anywhere. So I mean, that was that. And I even saw Mark Henry at the Iowa Luthez Tragos Hall of Fame and sat next to Mark at where the tables were, and gave Mark a copy of my book and kind of explained to him that I'm not allowed on Busted Open because of Bully. And he goes, he don't run that show. I mean, but he's got a lot of influence there. So yes. Mark said he would take care of it, but I never heard anything. And of course, I've never been invited to be on that show, but it is what it is. So what has been your experience with Mr. Mark LoMonaco?
I'm going to put a little frame around this just to bring people up to speed. I trained Bully Ray, Bubba Ray, Mark LoMonaco, whatever you want to call him. I was his trainer. Now,
and you had a contract with him.
Correct. And actually, I have a sheet at home where it was on a WWE site where it shows Devon's stats and his stats, and it says trained by with Devon, Johnny Rods. Mm-hmm. And for Mark, it says real name Mark LoMonaco, 6'4", blah, 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 and then it says trained by Sonny Blaze. But I'm not techie enough to do that photoshopping thing. So this is a thing that I just happened to see and I printed it. But anyway, and
you sent us a copy of the agreement. So,
Yeah. And so anyway, over the years, the story has changed so much with Mark. It started where he was on a podcast. It's funny because he uses these platforms, and he has big voice.
He's got a big megaphone.
Yeah,
that's probably the number one listened to wrestling talk show ever.
And I guarantee somewhere on there he has put the boots to me. I'll guarantee it. And frankly, I really don't care, John. I care. I care that I bother him enough that so many years later I'm still on his mind. That's the only part that bothers me. Otherwise,
I can relate to that.
We had a business agreement. I fulfilled it. I never liked him personally because he's just not a likable person, in my opinion. I'm sure there are people who would disagree with me and say, "Oh, he's great. I love him," but I never did. But anyway, so it starts out, he paid for me to train him, and I did the best I could. Now I'm going to say this because you might have listeners out there and viewers, I guess they're called now. We're not on the radio.
Listeners and viewers. We're on podcasts all around the world. I mean, you could pick this up all around the world on any podcast platform. And of course, we have our YouTube channel as well.
But I'm going to say that I was probably not the most qualified trainer. I thought so back then. I thought I was qualified. But I'm going to say that if somebody's looking to train to become a professional wrestler, you'd like to find somebody with more depth than I had. When I think about guys who have trained people like Larry Sharp with the Monster Factory, Killer Kowalski, Steve Kern down here in Florida, these are people with tremendous depth that could really instruct you well. I thought, okay, well, I trained. I've wrestled some of the biggest names in the world. That qualifies me to train other people. I'm going to say, looking back, I was incorrect. I probably shouldn't have. So anyway, I meet Mark, and actually at the time, I was bringing him to Johnny Rods because he was just interested in becoming a wrestler. So he and Johnny spoke, and I guess Johnny mentioned his fee, and Mark was not thrilled with the price, So I got to thinking, and I was like, that's when I said, well, why don't I do this, out here on Long Island? And I met a guy. He was given a building on the grounds of Pilgrim State Hospital by then Senator Pat Moynihan. Remember him?
Yeah, I do.
And it was for amateur boxing. It was, anyway, we had an agreement. He let me have part of the building, but I had to give him half the tuition of anyone who signed up. And I thought, okay, that's great. I'm not paying anything. It's my only rent is what I bring in.
Right.
It's a percentage. So anyway, I start talking to Mark, and he's trying to negotiate him and Han. And I'm like, no, if you don't feel comfortable, and then no, okay. So he signs up. He is my very first student. Now I had other students immediately after that. Mike Norman was one of my students. A guy named John Watson, who became Mikey Whipwreck, became one of my students. But I'm going to try to stay on topic with just Mark. Okay. So I trained Mark. Really, all I can train somebody to do is the basics. Mark was extremely athletic for a guy with zero muscle. His body fat must have been somewhere up at 80%. I mean, 6'4", 340 pounds, but amazingly agile.
Agile, absolutely.
Very, very quick to learn. When I'm teaching him just a simple back bump, which is not as simple as it sounds when you're doing it. He tried it the first time, not quite right. He goes, no, I can get this. And, I have him holding the second rope type thing, squatting down. Third time, had it perfect, never missed it again. He was perfect every time he did it.
Good learner, quick learner.
Very quick. By the way, he really is a very, very smart guy.
Yes,
he's a graduate of St. John's University, I believe, School of Business. Mm-hmm. He was in a fraternity, and by the way, we'll get to.
Yeah, one thing I want to preface on all of this is that we're not here to bury anybody.
No, just explain.
But to kind of explain, because it's always puzzled me why I was so hated by him, and because I've never had the opportunity to talk to him about it or apologize if I did something wrong.
No, you didn't.
But that's the thing, is you just have that in your mind, and then when you and I reconnected and we were talking, and then when the subject somehow turned to Mark, and when you started telling me your history with him, and then when we discussed the October 1993 show I promoted and that you were instrumental in helping with, that's when I was like, this has got to be addressed somehow.
Yeah.
Maybe the answers are in this conversation. So that's what I hope to accomplish.
Right. And everything I'm going to say, I'm going to preface with, this is my personal feeling. I don't like him personally. I'm not saying that everybody else in the world shouldn't like him.
Right.
And I'm never going to say, I really believe if you get 100 people to tell me a zebra is a giraffe, it doesn't make it so. So if I tell you, well, this guy said this about him and this guy said, so what? None of that matters. It's just how I feel. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I trained Mark, and I don't know if you remember, John, but I always had trouble dropping an elbow, just a simple back drop, dropping an elbow. And you remember Great Muda, of course, everybody does. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, I'm going to try his elbow. Remember that snap elbow with the leg sweep? Boom.
Yep.
Well, so I tried that, except I'm not nearly as athletic or quick as he is. But when I swung my leg, it looked like a leg drop, but it's still swinging, and it wound up taking my left leg with it up into the air, and now I did a nice elbow. And that's the elbow. I can only teach what I know, so that's the elbow I taught Mark. Now, if you look at the elbow he drops, he's still dropping that elbow, where he gets his leg up over the guy. It looks like he's getting ready for a leg drop, but he continues to sweep and comes down. And the full Nelson, I wanted to invent, back then, finishers were finishers. So a pile driver was a finish, a DDT was a finish. It wasn't a high spot.
Yes.
I wanted to come up with a move that could come out of nowhere and end the match. And I came up with, I was, I'm a big fan of Mr. Ken Padaris. I love Mr.
Yes.
Well, I remembered his swinging neck breaker, but that's awfully hard to do unless you're as powerful as he is. And that's like one in the world. Mm-hmm. So what I came up with, though, was from the full Nelson, dropping down to my knees and snapping your neck forward and then back. It could be done off the ropes, was how I originally planned it. Throw the guy into the ropes, full Nelson, drop down. Now, I did it to my knees. And the first time I did it was actually on Mark. I had him snap forward, only I left my face exactly where it was. So when his head came back, hit me in the mouth. Oh. Then I started moving to the side and, everything was great.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait a second, this can be done just standing. So it's something that can come out of nowhere. And that's what he calls the bully bomb or the Bubba bomb.
Got it.
But he sits out.
Yeah.
I did to my knees because I didn't know how to get my leg, it was just easier to go down to my knees. So there's a couple of examples of things that I actually trained that he does. Now, he has done everything possible to disassociate himself with my training him. He now credits Johnny Rodz. He might have worked with Johnny Rodz and learned something from Johnny Rodz, who, by the way, was 1,000 times the instructor I was.
Oh, yeah. And he's still kind of doing it, I think.
I would, for me to deny that would just be ridiculous, John. We both know
Johnny Rodz is an incredible worker.
Yep. And incredible trainer.
Yeah.
I mean, Big Vito LaGrasso, Tommy Dreamer, Taz, Alex the Great, Big Dick Dudley. I mean, he trained
Vince Russo.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I've never met Vince Russo. I've just heard of him. And again, he's a guy I've heard, like, so many people love him. And then somebody, somebody I don't know, everybody I know thinks highly of him.
Yeah.
Everyone I know personally.
Yeah.
But then you'll hear something from somebody else in the wrestling business. Oh, he's this.
Well, I mean, he's polarizing. He always has been, always will be. That's, when I was doing business with him, it was a short-term partnership, and he wound up becoming, who he became, which was McMahon's right hand.
And some people have told me, like, right under Paul Heyman, you would have to put him as a wrestling mind.
Yeah.
But, I would put...
He made, obviously his TNA stuff and later on the things, and he's so polarizing. And Vince and I didn't talk for years and years and years. And because that the whole story's been told before, but we have a very cool relationship now. And
good.
And we patch things up on YouTube 3-4 years ago now, and actually end of 2018. And ever since then, we've had a friendship.
Well, and he's had a great career in wrestling.
He had a wonderful career in wrestling.
Yeah.
During the Attitude Era, which was to this day the most successful era in the history of the business.
But so let's go back to somebody else with a very, very impressive wrestling career, who, again, every chance he gets will put the boots to me, and he's welcome to do that. If anybody wants to listen, they can. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But what's funny is, I think this all started. Remember when Cactus's book came out?
Yeah,
his very first
one. Have a Nice Day.
Yes, and by the way, I still think his book, Tatum Brown, should be made into a movie. But anyway, I love that book.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had to meet Cactus at the Tampa airport because there would be very little time for an autograph, and this is right after Bubba Ray, the Dudleys, started at the WWF. So I had very little time. Cactus was kind enough to sign a couple of copies for me, but he had to catch a flight. And I just happened to mention, when you see Mark, do me a favor, tell him, congratulations, I'm happy on his success. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then word gets back to me that, oh my God, he had a fit, and so I think he thinks that I'm going to use training him as some sort of, I'll parlay it into doing something with
stone.
Yeah. I'm out of wrestling. I have no, but anyway, so I trained him. He was never a pleasant guy. He was difficult, even in the gym working out. He's just difficult. He was very braggy. I don't know what's the proper word, but he'd always brag about himself. At the time, he was working for Atlantic Nissan in West Islip. Remember on Sunrise Highway?
Yeah.
And I did tell him, by the way, that because I was working on shows up in Connecticut at a car dealership called Century Toyota, #1 volume Toyota dealer in New England. And those shows were put on by Mike Peskin, who's wrestled as Mike Incognito. He started the IPW back then. And he was able to put on a whole show for what the car dealership paid just for an autograph session with Tito Santana.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these shows had Rick Rude versus Paul Orndorff. I mean, that's Madison Square Garden being held at a car lot.
Mm-hmm.
So what I told Mark was, hey, if you can get me 3 shows at the Atlantic auto mall, you'll be getting the finder's fee. You'll be getting your what you paid to train right back. But I never told him I would give him back his money at the end of his training. That would be a ridiculous statement to make.
How could that be? How could that be?
That's one of the things he said. Why? Because I lied to him. I didn't pay him back the money. Never said I would. And I mean,
but when you're training, you're paying somebody to train you, you're supposed to get a rebate, or you're supposed to get that money back after the training is completed. So that doesn't make business sense.
Well, yeah, I think that changed to, well, I was just a terrible trainer and that's why he hates me and I misled him and blah, blah, blah. None of that's true. But one of the things that my school did provide was a lot of people came through and worked out with each other. We had the Power Twins there. Chris Michaels would come by. Even Cactus a couple of times was training. This was just before Cactus really took off, Mm-hmm. So he would stop by and work out. And so it was a good place as far as a lot of people showing up and working with each other and working with these students. But so anyway, his first ring name, his fraternity name was Mongo. And so when you're new, you're always thinking about, someday I'm going to headline at Madison Square Garden. I'm going to be at WrestleMania. Everybody thinks that. So you start already thinking about gimmicks and stuff. So, okay, we're going to think about a name for this very big guy who can do a lot of stuff. And I really thought he was kind of not a very good person. So I came up with Vile, spelled with a Y, Vyle. And
like a vile person.
A vile person, exactly. But instead of Vile, Vyle. Mm-hmm. So he's Mongo Vile. And he was going to have a finisher called the Violator. That's where he's starting to go. I mean, he's starting to be a little creative on his own.
Yeah.
Not that these are great.
Well, he was, trying to create a vision for what he was going to do in the ring and create these signature moves and gimmicks and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we do when we first start, because we're dreaming of headlining at Madison Square Garden. Every single person who's ever put on boots. So anyway, I continued to train him. I fulfilled the contract. But man, was it difficult, because he was just not, for me, he was just not a likable person. So one day I get a call from you. You're running a show up at, I believe it was the LaGuardia Ramada.
Yeah, it's the Ramada Hotel. It was at my final Wrestling Fans Convention, a Weekend of Champions, and I decided to do a live matches to kick it off. So
you asked me about renting the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And if I knew anybody who could work the show. Now, at that time, Mikey Whipwreck was not Mikey Whipwreck. He was working on my ring crew.
Yeah.
But, and he was too small.
He was a small guy back then.
I was wrong. Obviously, Paul Heyman knows better than I do.
Of course.
But so I sent him and I think Craig, they took the ring over to the Ramada Inn, put it up. And I called Mike Norman and I called Mark LoMonaco and told them to both go to the Athletic Commission, which is on Broadway in Manhattan, and get their license that they're going to be wrestling on your show. And now I don't know this at the time. This actually happens. I find out the truth years later. I thought he just didn't like me because it got to the point where at the end I disassociated with him. And I thought that was the cause of the heat. But
that was at the Weekend of Champions show?
No, from my school. I just started.
Oh, okay.
Not welcoming him.
You still asked him if he wanted to do the show.
Right. But the school was still open after that.
Yeah.
But we had a little bit of heat from that show, and it just intensified how much I didn't like him. So I'm going to fast forward to a few years ago.
No, I actually want to go through what happened in October, because that's kind of, because he sent him and Mike to the State Athletic Commission to get their licenses.
Right.
I'd never promoted a live match in New York before. So I had I don't know whose license I rented. I rented somebody's license for that.
Probably Howard Rapp.
I think it was Howard Rapp. Yeah.
Everybody did.
Yeah. I think I got my license from him. And of course it's the doctors and the officials, and they all had to have a presence at that show, and
you actually have
collect
to have
tax
3
money.
judges.
And the judges, yeah. So that, that was all a legit thing. It wasn't a outlaw show. It was a certified New York State Weather Commission sanctioned matches. And just to let everybody know, this was the card that we put together, and then we'll get into the story about what happened before that opening match. So it was your guys in that first match. Then it was you against Louis Spicolli, who was fresh off AAA, and we had put him out there as Madonna's boyfriend. And Spicolli stayed in the ring after your match, didn't leave the ring, challenged Conan, which was worked out before time. I wasn't the booker of the show.
No.
I let that, I let it to the guys that were professionals. Kevin Sullivan was involved. You were involved. Terry Funk is backstage. So anyway, it was Spicolli against Conan. Chris Candido brought him in with Tammy against Taz, who was there with Tommy Dreamer. Then I had a 6-man tag with Tom Davis, Metal Maniac, and Dennis Knight against Sunny Beach and the Power Twins. And then Sabu fought Conan, which was their first time ever, which was a wild match. And then the main event, and I think the Putskis were there too. I just don't remember. Ivan and Scott were there at the convention.
Yeah.
And I think they worked, but there's no video documentation of that. And the main event was Terry Funk with Sensational Sherry against Kevin Sullivan with Woman. And then there was a run-in by the original Sheik. So that was kind of cool, and that was a great show. But anyway, the opening match was going to be Mongo Vile against Mike Norman. So I was so busy doing everything else. I mean, I let the professionals do what they do, run the show. And explain to us now what happened before that first match entered the ring.
Okay, so Kevin Sullivan was running your locker room and booking.
He was.
My entire participation was the ring and a couple of guys and myself.
Yeah, we put you to work too, sure.
Yeah, of course. But so that's the extent of what I'm doing for the show. But Mike shows up. He went and got his license like he was asked to do. Mark comes up, and in typical sort of Mark, I don't know, like he pulls me aside, big secret, hey, Sonny, I wasn't able to get to Manhattan to the athletic commission. And I'm like, what? Well, don't worry about it. I'll still get on the show, because he's that guy that thinks he can always circumvent something, he'll figure out a way. And I was pretty angry because I want your viewers to understand that somebody who does something like this is putting the show at risk. First of all, now it's my reputation with you. It's if he goes in the ring, you could face a severe fine if that had gotten caught. So you're putting the show at risk. You're putting my reputation at risk. There's a lot more involved than just one person. So I think as a coach, I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be some kind of penalty for this, to teach him a lesson. So I talked with Kevin Sullivan. And I said, Kevin, do me a favor.
You explained what was going on to Kevin?
Yes.
Okay.
So actually, I don't think I explained to detail because I didn't want, if he was going to get away with it, I didn't want anyone to know.
Kevin might have said he can't work.
Right. So I said, do me a favor. He didn't listen to something I asked him to do. I'm pretty sure it went something like this. Have him do the favor in the first match, put Mike Norman over. And it has nothing to do with who I preferred. I like them both. They're both my students. I want them both to do well. Now, Mike was a much nicer person, in my opinion. But so would you mind, and he was like, yeah, sure. Now, if that was absolutely the wrong call, let's say it was absolutely crazy, Kevin would have said, Sonny, I can't do that. It's ridiculous, because Mike weighed about 220. You got this guy 340, but Mike had a decent enough look. He wasn't ripped to shreds.
Yeah.
And he could work his ass off. Pardon me.
Now we're going to watch this match, and we're going to do kind of what you would call a watch along with this. But the question I also had was like, how many matches had Mark had before this show?
Both of them. You gave them both their first ever match. This is their first match ever. The reason I brought them to your show was I knew they could have a match. I didn't really care who went over or not. It wasn't about that. It was just, I know these guys can give you good work. And I knew that they wouldn't be intimidated by the crowd.
Yeah.
Now, Mark had a lot of his fraternity brothers in the crowd that night. As a matter of fact, later when we see the match I was in with Louis, the side of the ring, there was only
why don't we do this? I mean, Marsh, is there any way you could pull that up so we could watch it as we're discussing this now?
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up right now. I'm going to play it while you guys are talking so you can keep the conversation going on top of it.
Okay.
I also did, just so you know, I found the TNA match, and I found the moment where Bully is right on top of you. Cactus is already, and I'm already making the clips of it and stuff. Like,
oh, cool. Everyone can see this on YouTube. When you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see this stuff, which is very, very cool. So, I mean, visually, the Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast, the video version is just filled with all kinds of wonderful things like that. And everything that you do on the video version, Marsh, I mean, it is the most unique wrestling podcast out there with this stuff.
Being the video guy, this is the stuff that just gets me all hyped up. I'm all like, oh my God, I'm finding all this stuff. Like, it's great.
Yeah, I'm glad you found it. That's good.
And John, I just want to a little note how petty this was.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, Bubba actually asked me, was I his first call? And I said, no. And he was hurt that he was my third call because I called John first, Mike second, and him third.
Yeah.
I called the guys to get the ring to you first.
Right.
And then I called Mike, and then
there it is. Yeah. Yeah. So we're talking, people could watch as we're talking about all this with Billy Anderson making the introductions and all that.
I remember Billy.
Billy is Billy Anderson. What a great guy. I've used Billy back in the day. I mean, he went to Venezuela with me. He was a referee for me. He was a ring announcer, instrumental when I promoted Lucha Libre shows with AAA out in California. Used him and Jesse Hernandez's ring out there. And yeah, I mean, what a wonderful, long relationship I've had with Billy Anderson. Great guy.
By the way, do you see the green rope?
Yeah.
That's still from Herb Abrams with the green.
Oh.
What were the three? Green, yellow,
yes, and purple.
Purple.
Yeah. So,
and by the way, don't ever have a dark rope on top because it was very difficult to see with the lighting.
Yeah.
But,
and here's a girl who's as we're watching here. She's sang the national anthem for us, and she was a soap opera star, and she passed away recently, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Jeez.
Yeah. But anyway, we're here. The matches are about to start. There's no license that was given. Now, did the Athletic Commission ever offer like temporary or
no?
You had to have that license
correct
before you stepped into the ring, and so it wasn't like, all right, here, pay the fee, and you could wrestle.
Right, because they did an EKG at the Athletic Commission.
Okay, they do the EKG there. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And there it is. It's Mondo. I had Mondo Vile there against Mike Norman, and those guys were about to enter the ring. But yeah, this is fascinating for me talking to you about this because when we did kind of have this conversation offline, and there's Henry Terranova, who was the referee, and what a great guy he was, and legacy referee up there in the Northeast. Yeah, so this is really fascinating for me, especially that we have a visual of this that's up on YouTube. But now anybody watching on this this video version of the podcast will be able to see this match, and it's handheld. And there he is. He's got a full head of hair. And who? And I'm walking out. You were actually going out with. Were you going out with what? Mike, right? Mike Norman.
Right. Yeah.
Nice jacket there, Sonny.
He made it for me. I never
Mike
had that.
Did?
Yeah. I remember I had the baseball jacket with the Broadway Sonny Blaze on the back.
Yeah, exactly, like a windbreaker type of thing.
Right.
Well, that is very nice.
Yeah, he wanted us to look like a tag team. I came out there to
And
get
here,
some of the
and here he
nerves.
comes. There he comes in the leather jacket, and
Yep.
he's being accompanied by somebody. It looks like maybe a relative or something.
No, that's actually John Watson. That's Mikey Whipwreck.
That's no kidding.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, you can see this on you. There he is, and he has the face, but he had a full head of hair.
Yes, he did. That little mullet going on.
Yeah,
Big boy.
big boy. So you could tell that he doesn't seem to be in a good mood there anyway, because obviously he knows that he's not going to have his arm raised at the end of his first match. But he knew how to work a crowd, though, didn't he?
I know it's a weird thing to bring up, but he's also wrestling in a T-shirt. You know what I mean? I don't know how confident he's feeling.
Well, he's always wrestled with a shirt because I think his body is just that bad. Although his body is better today than it was 20 years ago.
He's in tremendous shape today.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
but he was always very blubbery in the belly.
But even then, like early on, I feel like just especially with all the indie wrestling that I watch, you can tell the guys who are just super insecure because they're just wearing a T-shirt over top. I mean, I wore a T-shirt swimming up until I was in my late 20s. Like I get it, But
I'm the same way. I'm with a shirt constantly if I'm ever out in the public with water nearby. But anyway, these spots that they're doing, do you know that if they worked out all this out beforehand and they had done enough training together to kind of know their spots?
They did enough training together that this would have been very easy for them to call. They might have hit a few things. You might have noticed when they were in the corner, Mike leaned in and said something.
Right there was leaning
right there.
Too. I know.
This was a favorite of his because he was able to bump so well, and so he could make everything look like he just destroyed you. Like right now, it looks like Norman should be in a wheelchair. Actually, he should have sold it a little longer.
I think it's interesting too, John, that you brought up the look on his face coming out there, because Cornette famously talks about it as a jobber boo-boo face.
Jobber boo-boo.
Yeah, he'll bring it up when he sees something big. He's like, "Oh, that person's got jobber boo-boo face coming out. They're not winning this one." And I'm like, "What?" So it's funny. That's the first thing he said. He looks like he's in a bad mood because he's gonna lose. You can see he's got proper tights underneath with that red in the back.
Yeah, there is. There's like he's wearing shorts and something over, like it looks like a wrestling.
Look like a leotard thing.
Yeah.
And you see, Mike Norman is credible enough. It's just a good big man beating a not so good, a good little man beating a not so good big man. It's happened 1,050. Eddie Gilbert made a career out of it.
And there it is. That was it. It was short and sweet. But now he's getting his heat at the end after he lost, and he's making sure he's getting his heat, and he's pummeling Mike, and there's Mikey Whipper coming in the ring. That is so. That's you.
No, that's me.
Yeah,
that's me, John.
Yeah, it is you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But anyway, that's that. You could stop that now, and so yeah. I mean, what was the reaction? Was there any reaction after the match was over and you guys were in the back?
Yeah, later he pulled me aside and he goes, I don't know why you did that. Even Kevin said that it was ridiculous, and I said Kevin didn't say it was ridiculous. Kevin just rubber stamped it, said go.
Yeah.
I explained why I did it, and he was just generally pissed off at it. He didn't like, if you want to, losing his first match. And plus he had his fraternity brothers there.
Right. So that was embarrassing.
Yes, it was. And I've thought about that a lot of times, John. I'm not sure. I'm torn between knowing how much it meant to him now. Would I have done it again? And I would say yes, because back then that's what you did to teach somebody.
And I don't want to preface this. I knew nothing about what went on until I spoke to you when we reacquainted ourselves with each other a few weeks back. Yeah. And I said, well, maybe that's why he doesn't like me either, So I don't,
but because it was your show,
yeah,
and you can never have your first match back, But
right. And to just say, I had no idea who was going over on any of these
Nope.
matches.
You
None
don't.
of them. I that wasn't what I do.
Mm-mm.
I'm not a booker.
No.
And I don't know how to tell people what. No, it's just kind of like I was promoting it, and I had a million other things going on, and so that entire show, I had no clue who was going over, why they were going over. The only involvement I had during that entire show was when Tammy and Chris Candido called me into the ring after their match, and she called me a fat slob or something, and it was like they were getting heat on me, and I don't even know why. I just went into the ring, and I was like, the match stands or whatever it was, and that was it. And but anyway, it was kind of like this fascinating look back at what happened all those years ago, and it kind of explains some things. Go ahead.
What made the light bulb go off for me was I just thought it was because we didn't like each other. And finally in the gym, I'm kind of pushing him out. He's done with his training. I'd rather you not even come and work out. We had a couple arguments over the phone, and we no longer saw each other.
Yeah.
I thought that was it all these years. Then Mike Peskin was at one of Cactus's comedy shows. And Cactus apparently takes questions. So Mike stood up and said something along the lines of, you remember your big accomplishment to wrestling, Broadway Sonny Blaze. And Jack, of course, he goes, Sonny and I, good friends, blah, blah, blah. How do you know Sonny? And then he goes, I have a funny story to tell. And he mentions Bubba Ray Dudley, who's had a tremendous career, Hall of Fame career, ridiculously decorated, all kinds of things. And he goes, he's still talking about his trainer because his trainer made him do the job in his first match. I never put that together until Mike told me about Cactus.
Oh, okay.
So now I don't know if Cactus heard something, I have no idea. Or if he just assumed it, or but that made so much sense because he was so bitter about it that night and so bitter about it afterwards. And that's really when the heat went from we don't like each other to him despising me.
Yeah.
Where like,
well, I'm sure that this episode is not going to elevate us.
Oh,
no, I'm doing this as a fact-finding mission. Yeah. There's no malice or intent here because I've honestly have been so stumped and so kind of like why. And here, my philosophy on life, even if I had heat with somebody years ago, like Rougeau or anyone, I don't hate anyone. And I try, if there's somebody that dislikes me, it's like there's nothing you can do. But if there's a way for somebody to talk it out with you and kind of give you, this is why I don't like you, that would really make me understand it. And if I remember doing something wrong, I would certainly apologize for it.
But he might be the only Hall of Fame superstar in the history of professional wrestling who will use a massive format like a podcast to put the boots to the guy who trained him. To even mention me is, it's like, who goes, and, I love this old quote. Well, I know it as a quote from Muhammad Ali, but if you think the same at 52 as you did at 22, you wasted 30 years of your life.
Yeah.
And I've always felt that, like that, of course, you're supposed to grow. You're supposed to, and if it's still bothering him, I'm sorry that it bothers you. I'm not sure I would do anything different. I'm not sure I did anything wrong. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to say I'm not as good a trainer as Johnny Rodz, of course, I'll say that all day. If you want to say even I wasn't qualified to train at all. Looking back, I'll say, you know what? You're not wrong. I wasn't but I did enough that I was able to at least unlock the door, if not open the door, for him and Mikey Whipwreck. Yep. So somewhere I did something that helped them, even if it was just introducing them to you at that, getting him that first show.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool that we can discuss this and kind of talk about it. And like I said again, and I'll say it one more time, it's nothing, not trying to bury anyone here, just trying to have some discovery on what could possibly be the reasons of his animosity and venom towards not just you, but in the other side of the coin, me.
John, I mean this with everything in my being. I am happy for Mark.
I am too. I mean, I love the Dudleys. I love everything he did in the WWE and TNA. I mean, what a realistic, probably when he says he really is the bully, he really is the bully. I mean, and he has lived that gimmick and he lives it every day and he's still working. And he is one of the most realistic performers, wrestlers in the business because he is believable at anything he does. There's no like, this is a showman. No, he is the real deal.
Yep. And I'm going to tell you,
legitimate tough guy.
Well, that's a.
I mean, as far as that's my perception, it could be wrong or whatever, but that's my perception.
But I'm going to say I love his uncle Nick, and his uncle will never remember this. Mark will never remember this, but I told Mark the story. I once took my sister to Good Samaritan Hospital in West Islip on Montauk Highway.
Yeah.
Now, if you remember, there's really nowhere within walking distance. There's no delis or anything like that.
Not no.
You have to go to the other side of 231, Deer Park Avenue. So anyway, I walked to Montauk Highway, and right next door was a little Italian restaurant, very elegant, called LoMonaco's.
Yes.
Well, that is his Uncle Nicky's restaurant.
Oh, okay.
So LoMonaco's is Mark LoMonaco's uncle's restaurant.
No kidding.
Nope, no kidding. So anyway, I go in there. They're not open. And they don't sell sandwiches. And so I didn't know what kind of restaurant it was. But let me tell you what his Uncle Nicky did. I told him the story. I took my sister to the emergency room. I'm starving to death. He went in the back, took a loaf of Italian bread. Now I'm still in the restaurant. He's in the kitchen. Took like the salami, the gabagool, everything for the antipasta and made a sandwich for me. This sandwich could have jammed a wood chipper. And I'm like, how much is this? And he's like, and I think just being a businessman, he had to charge something. He charged me $3. I could barely carry this.
That's great.
That's how good a person his Uncle Nicky is.
Yeah.
Now, years later, I had a supermarket in Lindenhurst.
I remember that. Yeah.
And an elderly woman had an accident with a motorcycle rider. The elderly woman comes in and asks if I could call her son, Nick. Nick is Nick LoMonaco.
LoMonaco, okay.
At that point, I know this is Mark's grandmother.
Yeah.
I sat her down, got her some water. Of course, I called Nick, but I have to wait for him to get from West Islip to Lindenhurst. I wouldn't let anybody near her to talk to her until Nick got there, because I wanted to protect her from anything. I don't know what the law is and all that stuff. So I'm not letting anybody even near her until Nicky gets there. Nicky got there, and I said, I don't know if Nick remembered me or not. But, and so even after all of this nonsense with Bubba, when he was back with being Mongo Vile, when it came time to take care of somebody, I still did the right thing. I think I did the right thing.
Yeah.
And I've never forgot the kindness. And if anyone has a chance on Long Island to eat at LoMonaco's, if it's still there, it's a great restaurant.
I remember it. I know I dined there when I was living there.
Yeah. But that is, I love that story. I've told that story 1,000 times.
Yeah. About
this guy, Nick LoMonaco, making me this gigantic sandwich from Antipasto, and because my sister, all of my sisters are old, but my sister was in the emergency room and I hadn't eaten. And that was so generous. He didn't have to do that. It shows how kind he is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this story has been great. I mean, I'm happy that you shared it. I'm happy that we're discussing it. You had a great match that night. If people want to see that, it is on YouTube. Just on the basis of time here. I mean, it's a fabulous match with you and Spicoli. It really is. So that entire card is on YouTube, and we'll, put the link up, and it's easy to find, so people can get a chance to see you in action. And even though you did lose to Spicoli, it was a long match too. I think it was 12 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that.
On a personal level, I liked Louis very, very much.
Me too.
We worked in the UWF together.
Yep.
We've been on independent shows together, and he was just always such an upbeat, positive, just a genuinely
nice guy, man.
Really nice guy to be around. Yeah.
He was funny guy, nice guy. I loved any interaction I ever had with him.
Yep.
And I think in future episodes of this program that we actually have him on. So that'll be the year 1994, I believe, or maybe at the end of 93 or in the middle of 93. Anyway, he comes on the show in the future. See the entire card of the Weekend of Champions, which took place October 22nd, 1993 on YouTube. And my friend, we're going to bring you back again, but this time it'll be with your nemesis, the twins, and round up Bruce and Donny and have a real cool NYG reunion. And that'll be coming up in a not too distant future. Listen, man,
and John, I just want one more thing about
Sure.
Bubba, okay? In no way would I ever say that I trained him to be Bubba Dudley. That was all him. Right. I taught him how to protect himself. I taught him a few things. And then, boy, he took a good gimmick, made it better.
There's no doubt that the guy's been a genius in yes. everything about his career and his style and his legacy even. But, you gave him the first opportunity to kind of practice and learn, get a few moves under his belt.
And he did pay me for that, so he doesn't owe me a thank you or anything. It was a business transaction.
And get him booked on his very first match, even though it was in a losing effort. And that had, a backstory, which we have now learned about.
Yeah, I wish that he wouldn't. You don't deserve that. If he wants to do that to me, maybe I deserve it. You don't deserve it.
Oh, maybe I deserved why he hates me. I don't know. I just don't know what the reason is. So I'd like to someday find out, and maybe I will. And
I don't think there needs to be a reason, frankly.
Yeah, well, he does say like it. I was listening to their busted open WrestleMania party from Hollywood, and I think it was like someone who came up on stage. I don't know if it was Mickey or something. Mickey Jones. He's like, I don't like you, but do a shot with me, and I don't like you because of this, and I don't like you because of that. And he says that a lot. Like, even though I don't like you, and who knows, because it's like. And I never forget last summer when Napolitano is like, don't even try to talk to him. Don't. And then he was like, don't bring him up here. And I'm like, whoo, here,
Okay.
So that's the first time it happened, man. So,
and
I live in distance.
I live in Tampa Bay. There's a lot of guys that live around. I mean, I've bumped into so many who, and I'm not going to name names, but they agree with me. He's just not a pleasant person,
He doesn't like a lot of people. Let's put it that way.
And the best I heard was the only people he's nice to are the people who can do something for him.
Ah.
And that rings true with a lot of people. So, you can't do anything for him. So, if you got the book tomorrow in the WWE, guarantee you'd be welcome at his table.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
My friend, Broadway Sonny Blaze, I want to thank you for coming on this show.
Thank you, John.
It's been an amazing experience, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Okay, and I'm sorry you're paying for my sins.
I don't think
maybe you could do a few years in purgatory for me, too.
Oh, I will. I promise you that. Okay. Thank you, Sonny.
Thank you, John.
All right. I don't think I'll keep this, but I did want to say I do think there's something really kind of funny and poetic about the idea that he may potentially be that mad about a show that you booked him to lose on a show that you also booked you to lose. Like you also didn't go over that night,
Well,
you know, and in a match where it was two guys' first match.
yeah.
So if it wasn't him, then you would, if losing your first match ruins your career or some goofy shit, right? Then you had to pick him or Mark, right? Or not Mark, Norman.
Mike Norman.
So it's like, it's like such a damned if you do, damned if you don't just scenario, if that's what really is making him mad. You know what I mean?
Except in this case, I did it as a punishment. You know, and he knows I did it I made it clear to him. I wanted to make it clear because I wanted somebody's coming into the business that you got to teach. You know, John, they learn locker room etiquette. They learn a lot of things. Well, you also have to learn that when somebody instructs you to do something, if you're going to be on the show, you have to do it. And to show up without that license in hand and then come up, I forget all the excuses or whatever. And then to even be pissed that he was my third phone call, not my first. Why wasn't I your first? Well, because I needed the ring there first. And then my second call just happened to be to Mike. You know, you have to call somebody. And, but imagine having a career, John, what is that, 25 years ago? Maybe more?
30
years ago. Oh my God.
Yep.
30 years. And you're carrying this around. You're a mega superstar. You're known all over the world. And this guy, Sonny Blaze, is sitting in your head, and you resent him that much that you still will go on a pot. You'll take national airtime and waste it talking about me.
But I've also heard him talk about how in WWE they'll force you to pay your dues in certain ways. I've seen them do it. They'll punish a guy by this. Oh, you didn't do this thing, so now you have to take these losses. To pretend he didn't learn that from even that experience to begin with, but then give someone else credit for doing the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, because it happened to him once, that's a bad thing, but it happens to these other people later, it's a good thing. You know what I mean?
Well, there's an expression, do as thee, not for me, or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So, yeah, he'll say that about other people, but he doesn't want the rule applied to him. He really is not. I'm just speaking for me, Marsh. My experience is that there's nothing fair about him. There's nothing decent about him. You know, his uncle is obviously, in my opinion, 100 times the person he is. Now, he did everything on his own. He became Bully Ray, Bubba Ray, all of that work you see. But a lot of it is, have you ever seen him throw the Dusty Rhodes punch, John, where he does that?
Yeah.
You steal a trademark move, a patented move of Dusty Rhodes. That's kind of ballsy. You know, everybody who knows Dusty Rhodes recognizes it when they see it.
Yep.
And that's probably something you, as a
just
courtesy.
Saw Cody do it at WrestleMania, but of course he's got the same last name.
Right. Cody doing it, Dustin doing it, two different things.
Yeah.
But to do the Dusty, you know, and then go into an elbow or go into that double chop, it's like, man, he's just that arrogant, though. And I guess that's the best way to put it. He is arrogant.
Yeah.
And he was just so difficult to be in the company of. And I just don't, like I said, I tortured myself. Would you go back and do it again? And the answer is, yeah, I would. Because I still think it was the right thing to do. Now, because you've been around a very long time, John, and I respect you very much. Do you think I did the right thing, knowing what you know now?
Of course. I'm not going to say no.
And would everybody have done that?
I mean, as a much younger person who's just very much more outsider, it sounds as good. Like, you show up without a license, what do you think is going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, something's got to happen.
And if it was going to be detrimental to the show, Kevin Sullivan would have never agreed to it. Kevin Sullivan would have said, sorry, Sonny, I got to put this big guy over. Look at him. He's just massive.
Yeah, and Kevin's the pro of all pros.
Right. So Kevin went along with it. it wasn't because, oh, I'm going to do Sonny this favor. Okay, it makes enough sense. Would it have made better sense to put well, first of all, in the opening match, the heel seldom goes over.
Right.
That's just not, it's usually the face because you want to get the crowd going. I think what hurt him was he told me that his fraternity brothers were out there, and I still went ahead and did this. And that's what bothers. What bothers him was that he had to pay a price, and you'll hear him mention my name. He's on Jericho is Wrestling or something like that. He brings up Sonny Blaze. That was sent to me. And I'm like, I can't believe that here this guy is, this mega star, and he's still talking about this match. His very first match was never aired. For most people, it doesn't even exist. They wouldn't even know it was him. If you look at him, you're not going to.
Here's the thing. I didn't remember it was him until I found this YouTube video of the show, and I'm like, that's Bubba.
Yeah.
And so that's where my memory was. I had no freaking clue.
But
I didn't know who he was back then. I did, but I didn't. Whatever it is, I didn't have a lot of interaction with him.
Right.
So
he also wasn't somebody's in.
Yeah, and as far as me even remembering him being on that show, it wasn't until I saw the YouTube video that I was like, "Oh, that. There he is."
John, I don't think you and I even spoke that night.
I don't think we did.
You were so busy. I spoke with Kevin Sullivan.
Yeah, I know. I got called away when Sabu broke the table because the hotel was like, "You're paying for that." What do you mean I'm paying for it? Well, I had to pay for it, and then I charged Sabu, and that didn't go over. And then he started selling pieces of it at the autograph table the next day, and he was signing pieces of the table.
Oh,
so good.
Quick, another Cactus Jack story. ECW, Cactus runs out of 8x10s. Back then, John was still, just Mikey Whipwreck getting banged around. Cactus asked him to go to Office Depot or Staples or something
to get some prints.
A ream of paper.
Yeah.
And he asked to go on before intermission. And it might not have been ECW. It might have just been a house show somewhere.
Okay.
So he gigs, and then what he's doing is he's smacking his head with the paper and signing it. And selling.
No, really?
Yes. This is Jack. This Cactus.
That was a money-making opportunity, wasn't it? I mean,
he wasn't missing it.
The blank piece of paper on his forehead to get a little blood on there, and then signing it.
Yep, and he has to go on before intermission, so he could be at the signing table at intermission.
What a genius!
Amazing!
So clever,
amazing.
And it was John who went and got him the Rima. What?
Yeah,
$4 for paper.
Yeah.
And he had 300
at least $5
sheets.
Each, right? At least $5 each at the time.
Oh, probably 5, 10. Not like now 30, but
right.
Yeah.
There can't be that many of those out there in the world right now.
No.
The amount of parents and stuff that would have been like, this is gross, we're throwing it out. You know what I mean?
To my knowledge, it's only happened at that one show. I don't know if he's ever done it since.
That's so funny.
But just a boom, and then signing.
That's so Mick too. He just looks. He knows opportunity.
Yeah, he does, and he knows as a kid he would have paid for that.
Right.
Yeah.
He had the mindset of a wrestling fan and always has.
Always.
He always knew what went over.
But John, I know sometimes I want to go off on 95,000 tangents with Mark, but really, basically, that's it. That's the whole story.
You explained it very well. I mean, enlightened me, enlightening the audience that listens to this, and I mean, I knew last week because we spent a lot of time, and I wanted to bring this up, and I was like, I got to bring you back for another go around here, so we could get to the bottom of this. Well, I mean, it's a story. I mean, we have a video that showed what happened in the match, and
what's crazy too is he got his heat at the end. It's not like he just lost flat and rolled out. He got a bunch of heat back.
He got a lot of heat at the end of that. Yeah,
but it I guess, and I'm I never understood until Mike came back and told me what Cactus said.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking the only way Cactus would think that is if he heard it.
Yes.
You know, because Cactus didn't even know about that match.
Yeah.
You know, Cactus wasn't there that night, John.
No, he was not.
No.
And he wouldn't have known about it unless he heard something. So I'm thinking through the grapevine or from Bubba, or Bubba said it to somebody and Devon said, you know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody told Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the only way then it made perfect sense to me, because he was so angry that night, you know. He was angry, you know. But I thought at the time I did the right thing. I did the right thing for his future in wrestling, teaching him how to be respectful of the locker room, of the show, of the promoter. I really thought I did the right thing.
It certainly didn't set him back.
No.
No.
You know what I mean? You didn't do a thing that ruined his career. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. Well, imagine if that's what held him back where he'd be.
Right.
Maybe that's what he thinks.
Wow.
Anyway,
Great
I'm glad that
recollection,
I actually
man.
had the opportunity to let fans know,
Yeah.
because they've been hearing a one-sided story for
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
15 years.
and it's not like it's being talked about every, you know, it's just kind of this getting to the bottom of this, as far as your viewpoint and what happened to me. I mean, that's what we did this for. That's all.
Oh, at no time. Marsh, you were listening. Did we actually say anything bad about him? Other than what I said personally?
No, my only thought, if I'm being honest, as I always am, not that you said anything bad, but that I feel like his ego is such that he takes it all bad. You know what I mean? I was like, well, he's not going to like any of this. But are you guys being mean or malicious or vicious or stiff? Like, no. It was just like, hey, we're just trying to kind of figure out what's going on here. You know,
I'm just trying to get to the bottom of the personal vendetta he seems to have against me.
And watching back that TNA clip, he's like, he's not goofing with you.
No,
this isn't like when MVP was talking shit to me when I was ringside.
No, I was shocked when that happened. When that happened to TNA, even Dixie was kind of like, she was like, what's going on?
You're laughing uncomfortably.
They were.
Like, it's clear as day, because you're like, what am I supposed to do? You know what I mean? Like,
I'm trying to smile, like I think it's part, but when I smiled, that's when he kind of leaned in more and grabbed my throat.
Yeah.
Should have just put your thumb right in his eyeball.
Yeah.
I mean, that was really potentially a litigation situation if I wanted to pursue that. I was attacked, sitting in the front row with the owner of the company and her husband.
And see, that's when I said not really. John is not. Mark is not legitimately a tough guy. He's a big guy. Now, pro wrestling might have toughened him up a little bit, but remember, he's from Dix Hills. He comes from a family of means. He was not a street guy.
Yeah.
You know, with all of this Hell's Kitchen, New York, and Red Hook, Brooklyn. None of Dix Hills, for God's sakes, John. You know, the guys from CI used to beat up the guys from Dix Hills. Yeah.
Well, it's a very affluent part of Suffolk County on Long Island,
and that's where Mark's from. Yeah. And he just had a spoiled brat type attitude, you know. Yeah. And to me, he still does, frankly. But anyway, that's the Mark LoMonaco story.
There you go.
And I really do hope everybody on Long Island goes out to LoMonaco's and has a nice Italian dinner if they're still open.
What part of Long Island was it in?
West Islip.
West Islip, yeah.
Okay.
I love all these memories, guys. I really, really do. So
it's so cool.
It's good to reminisce, man.
It is. But I'm holding up the rest of your show.
Keeps us younger.
But
it's great to see you. I'll reach out to you soon, man.
All right. I'm going to say Auf Wiedersehen. I'm not going to be a stranger, John. Please don't be a stranger either.
Not.
Marsh, thank you again.
Absolutely, man. You're the best. But John, getting into pro wrestling this week, because you missed Pro Wrestling Spotlight on April 3rd, which I think that you didn't record it, right?
Yeah, the show was not, even though the tape says, you know, Pro Wrestling Spotlight, April 3rd, it just didn't come out on the tape. When I was uploading it, it was blank. you know, the third show for Pro Wrestling This Week, which we're covering, is there, but on the other side, Pro Wrestling Spotlight, there was the whole side 2 was blank.
Which is also interesting because as I was cutting all these clips, it was a lot of like, well, tonight we're going to do this, and tonight we're going to do that, and tonight we're going to try and do this. And so it's interesting there's no show there to record to know if you did any of that. And I just want to ask this now because I'd asked you before we were recording, and I think it's fair to the audience that we know. You only re-listen to the tapes if you were pulling clips for some of your collection episodes, like the Christmas episode or a best of episode, things like that, right?
Well, I mean, some of the early, because I did the 2 years with Brian, you know, a lot of those early shows were covered on Brian's show. So that's when I first heard them. Like for all the shows that we're doing now, I mean, I've never heard them before.
Yeah, and I'm saying when you recorded them 30 years ago, it wasn't so you could re-listen to it for the next day.
No. Unless there was something significant.
Exactly. So like when you did the ones where it's all like, hey, here's a highlight of last year. These are the big ones. Right. You're not going to pick one that's just a
memorable moments have always been like memorable moments. You know, if I had to do it all over again, I would have definitely marked all of the George from Lindenhurst calls, which we're not going to be able to experience again until, you know, we start it from scratch again. But so, yeah, there's all of that stuff. Like some of these classic callers, I mean, it's like, that's a good marker. He's on this show.
Oh, yeah, great call, yeah. But, yeah, because I just thought some people might wonder how you would not know that you didn't have it recorded until now. You didn't have any reason to go back to it. It said Dave Meltzer and WrestleMania predictions.
That was it.
You did not get Hellwig, right? On the note that you wrote on it, it didn't say Jim Hellwig?
No.
Okay, because in this episode, Pro Wrestling This Week, you do say at some point, I don't remember if it's in one of the clips or not.
I do reference it in the next episode because I uploaded those shows which were there that we did have a conversation, but he didn't come on the air.
Okay, yeah. You were going to try and get a hold of him for the air.
Yeah.
We know that you did not get a hold of him for the air, but you did get a chat with him. So
I did get to chat with him, and we bring that up on the next episode.
Which is exactly why you would have never heard that episode. It's a prediction episode.
Right. I didn't care.
Didn't care. Nothing memorable. It's only Dave Meltzer. What's he ever said? Just kidding.
Yeah, what's he ever said, right? Yeah. But I mean, you know, we have such great stuff coming up, man. I'm just looking at what I have to upload. I have Jimmy Cornette. I got the Cactus Injury. There's so much coming up, so we're good to go.
Cool stuff. Before the show, for the Patreons who hear the whole thing, I just want to bring this up because it was really like notably weird. The advertisements before your show was Michael Douglas doing an ad for a pneumonia vaccine, and then Reba McEntire asking people to mail in nominees for what they called the America's Awards about unsung heroes who deserves the award for representing America. And I thought that was fascinating. And I was like, what award show was Reba McEntire a part of? And I did a ton of Googling. I asked Jeeves over and over again. He's my go-to professional Googler. I can't find anything about the America's Awards.
Yeah, I know she hosted ACM Awards in the country music field, but yeah, these were just kind of PSAs, public service announcements that we were required to run on the station. So they used to dump them in my show. Yeah,
but Michael Douglas and Reba McEntire. You want to talk about something 1993? That's pretty 1993 to me.
So. Yeah. Well, it's fascinating for people to listen to that stuff too. You know? People get a kick out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. When I went to edit it, I specifically asked you, should I cut this because I can't stop listening to it? And you're like, leave it. I was like, okay, perfect. Because I've re-listened to these ads a dozen times and I haven't got to the show yet. But we did open. I left in your opening because I love a punchy John Arezzi from 30 years ago. Everything you said prior to bringing on Dawn was cracking me up. So this is the opening. And I cut the music because we got a little copyright strike last time for your old generic music.
Yeah.
So it's out. But this is your opening to episode 205, April 3rd, 1993.
Good morning, wrestling fans. Welcome. A very festive weekend
It is WrestleMania weekend this weekend, and boy, I can't wait for that card tomorrow. It's going to be an exciting one, to say the least. I just can't wait to see the Giant Gonzalez. The host before this program were asking me about the Giant Gonzalez. Man, I tell you, what an athlete, what a wrestler. He is certainly going to be the best technical wrestler of 1993 in the polls. I think he's got a very early lead. The Giant Gonzalez. Yes. We have some exciting things for you today. We'll, of course, be talking about WrestleMania. Some big things happening this week regarding WrestleMania. On last Sunday's WSB Atlanta radio show, hosted by Mr. Jim Ross, his very special guests were none other than Vince McMahon. Can you believe it? Vince McMahon on Jim Ross's radio show, yes. Vince, of course, said that Christmas came early this year for the WWF. Boy, I tell you, I can't wait to talk about the big Christmas gift the WWF got Mr. Jim Ross going to WrestleMania tomorrow. Interesting stuff. Looks like it's just a kick to WCW's butt. Slap them in the face in their own hometown, Atlanta, Georgia. Their radio show that WCW had sponsored predominantly, now a WWF Vince Russo production. Can you believe it?
A Vince Russo production.
Can you believe it?
That is a... He wasn't with WWF at the time, Russo. I don't believe he was.
I don't think he was either, but was he a part of Jim Ross's radio show?
No. Vince Russo had his own show on WGBB, Vicious Vincent's World of Wrestling. But, yeah, I don't know. That maybe was like, me being a prophet.
Oh, do you think you were just trying to insinuate in a joking way that he was being a backstabber?
Pretty much.
Yeah, why wouldn't I? Huh. Yeah, that was very prophetic because Jim Ross and Vince Russo would work a lot together after that.
They would.
Yeah. I thought that was just crazy. I mean, for one, you're putting over Giant Gonzalez because
he's
a high-flying superstar he's going to become.
Fucking horrible wrestler, man.
I love the stories about Undertaker telling Vince, since you made me wrestle Giant, I want Yokozuna next. Like,
well, at least Yoko could work.
Well, that was this whole thing. You wanted to work with Yoko to begin with.
Yeah.
And then Vince goes, no, I got this guy for you. And he's like, fuck, really?
Yeah. And they put him out there with that furry suit.
So weird.
Crazy.
That suit never didn't make me feel uncomfortable.
Even it was like a freaking cartoon shit. It was horrible. It was just horrible. Everything about that guy, except his height, he was very impressive. I mean, to see a guy that big, but he couldn't do anything but kind of grunt and growl and lift his arm over his head.
And even then, it was like airbrushed muscles that you could tell. So even then, you're like, so this guy's clearly not fit.
Airbrush muscles, yes.
I think because you got upset. It sounded like the people right before the show, you walked in and they said, what's going on with Giant Gonzalez? He looks cool. And you're like, God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Sasquatch.
Yeah. Let's see. I got a kick out of it. And that's the beginning of the JR saga of today because there is another JR through line. You were really not happy about how the JR stuff went down. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's because when he bailed on the show,
Oh, yeah. You took that real personal.
I did, actually.
How long do you think before you were really kind of like, all right, it's fine?
Probably not too long after that. Especially when I started running IWAS and I had meetings with him about coming in. And
oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're still in that hot, bitter moment. And you
I'm still in the early stages of trying to get over it.
All right. Well, we bring Donny Laible onto the show, and I like your conversation you're having before it because I mean, even right now, we're just fresh off the heels of WrestleMania and watching WrestleMania with friends. Did you this year in real time, 2023? Did you watch WrestleMania with anybody?
Me, myself, and I.
Yeah, just
I
the
watched
original
both
crew.
nights. I loved it. I just loved it. I was blown away, and I was like, if they sell this company, this is the weekend to really showcase it and make it happen, you know. And then the sales announced on the Monday, the merger, and that's another whole story that, oh my God, I mean, he's back. You know, he's back. Vince is back. I mean, he's running it.
He looks like Boris from Boris and Natasha.
I am like horrified when I saw, I've been horrified looking at him for the last few years. He hasn't actually, when you say somebody hits the wall, I mean, this guy hit the wall head on at about 500 miles an hour, the way he looks, you know, and he's still in excellent shape. But what did he do to his face? And now his hair is jet black, and he's got that. He looks like from the silent movie era, you know, one of these villains from the silent movie era, the silent days. Like he's gonna. Anyway, it's bizarre, and he looks scary, and he is scary.
Vince McMahon definitely out of the silent movie era, almost like a strange Clark Gable. You know?
Right. Yes. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
And he never has.
No. Pal.
But I was asking you about your WrestleMania because in this one, Donnie asks you about your WrestleMania. Where are you going to be watching WrestleMania?
Okay.
You were hesitant to respond, but you did. So here we go. And then it also gets in the capsule right after because it's pretty close together.
Okay.
We'll talk about it on the other side.
You got it.
We're going to get on the phone with Donny Laible. Lots of things happening in pro wrestling this week, and we will talk about all of that. Let's bring our buddy, Don.
Johnny, hey, let me tell you something. For our listeners that may not know this, you know, everybody has their own way to celebrate WrestleMania, get together with people, watch it on TV. But this guy, our host here, is going to one heck of a party tomorrow, John. Tell everybody what you're going to be seeing.
Oh, they don't want it publicly announced.
Ooh.
Actually, I'm going to there's a WrestleMania party every year in New Jersey, in Livingston, New Jersey, at someone's house. He's a commodities broker. I went to it last year, and he just had a couple of wrestlers there just hanging out with us, watching the show. Nikolai Volkov was there last year. This year, there is an array of wrestlers coming to this mansion in New Jersey to watch the WrestleMania show, and there'll be some exciting activities before the show, which we could talk about next week. But I know your man will be there, Mr. Killer Kowalski.
I'll tell you something, boy, I wish I could be carrying your bags tomorrow. I'd love to be there. That sounds like a...
Carrying my bags, Don.
I'll do anything to go to that party, but we'll just leave him thinking about it for next week.
I am the Mountie.
Yes. I enjoyed meeting him last week, as I said earlier. One of the few people that you meet after 5 minutes and you think you've known for a long time. And
I got to know his son JJ by listening to that interview that you did with him.
Yes. He was hanging around quite a bit.
JJ, put daddy's socks in the bag.
Yes.
We're playing that interview today, by the way, Don.
Oh, you're good.
Yes, we are. It's
matter of fact, I had lost my tape recorder in the Mountie's bag, and I called him up at the hotel around 8:30 in the morning, and because we dressed together, had the same color bag, and he had JJ go fish it out of his bag. So
that's right.
Little kid was a big help there.
Yes, he was, and he sounded like a nice guy.
Yeah, very, very nice, very genuine. Something that you don't find every day.
That's right.
Really enjoyed it. Hey, we got WrestleMania coming up. Let's get right to the capsule.
Go right ahead, Donnie.
All righty. As every wrestling fan in the planet has to know, that WrestleMania 9, presented by the World Wrestling Federation, will take place tomorrow from Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, Nevada at 4 p.m. Eastern. The much-hyped two main events promised will be Bret Hart defending his singles title against Yokozuna, and in tag competition, Money Inc. puts their team championship belts on the line opposite Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake. Now, last Sunday on Jim Ross's weekly radio show heard on Atlanta's WSB, Vince McMahon stated, and I quote, "It seems Christmas has come early for the WWF," end of quote, in reference to Ross joining the promotion. Ross is expected to call 2 matches tomorrow. Another longtime fixture in the wrestling game has died. Wally Carbo, who along with Vern Gagne in 1960 formed the American Wrestling Association, passed away in Edina, Minnesota on March 25th due to a heart attack. Now, Carbo did it all in wrestling except put on the boots. He promoted, refereed, and held promotional figurehead positions such as the commissioner of the Ladies Professional Wrestling Association. Carbo was 77. Well, more names continue to be added to World Championship Wrestling's Old Timers Affair for their Slamboree weekend of May 23rd. Lou Thez, Ivan Koloff, John Tolos, Baron Von Raschke, and Ox Baker will be joining the likes of Vernon Greg Gagne and Mr. Wrestling 2, along with others. However, now Superfly Jimmy Snuka, mentioned as being booked for the event, coming from Snuka's own lips, he won't be there. And also there's talk of Tully Blanchard returning to WCW, possibly by the June Clash, to reform the Four Horsemen. Happenings from around the circuits, Diamond Dallas Page has entered Alabama-based USA Championship Wrestling. Beautiful Bobby Eaton became Smoky Mountain Wrestling's new television champ in beating Tim Horner, thanks to help from his manager Jim Cornette at ringside. And in Memphis, Tennessee, the duo of Brian Christopher and Scotty Flamingo stripped the USWA tag belts from the Moondogs. Well, next Saturday and Sunday, the National Wrestling Collectors Association will be holding their first annual convention. The event will be at the Music City Roadway Inn in Nashville, Tennessee. Kangaroo Costello will be the recipient of the association's first League of Legends Award. Many old-timers are expected to attend, such as the Spoiler, Nelson Royal, Johnny Weaver, and Bulldog Don Kent. Finally, in 1987, that's 6 years ago in wrestling this week, up in Calgary, Canada, it was Owen Hart. He went to a no contest with Makan Singh. Over in Tokyo, Japan, Tiger Mask and the Great Kabuki defeated Tommy Rich and Carlos Colon. And in Fort Worth, Texas, it was a masked Red River Jack, Bruiser Brody, pinning Jack Victory. For Pro Wrestling This Week, I'm Don Laible reporting. Capsule time, 10:09.
I love Don.
Donnie's great. So what are your questions?
So how often were you going to these? Like, was that like a yearly thing for a while? These big,
Well, no,
were they paid appearances?
Here's the backstory. I just texted you a link. I was very dear friends with a guy named Mike Omansky. Mike is a legend wrestling fan. He was actually in attendance when I lost to Dusty. Mike and I go back since the 70s. I used to hang out with Mike at Madison Square Garden, upstairs at the restaurant with Georgianne Macropolis, and he was part of that inner circle. Mike's cousin, a gentleman named Jeff Buchantz, was a very successful entrepreneur, and he had a affinity because he was a fencer, which I guess Maccabi is what the terminology is. It's a Jewish fencing team or something.
Gotcha.
Big wrestling fans, raising money for this charity. And I was asked to come to Jeff's house because he had a ring set up, and he held a wrestling card at his house. And that was on April 4th, 1993 was the first one, and I did play-by-play, and Mike Omansky did color. And so the performers on that show in his backyard, with the attendance of 325, it was called Maccabea Mania. And Mr. Motion defeated Ace Starling. Iron Mike Sharp beat the Cheetah Kid, Ted Petty. I think they used Ted Petty's ring. Misty Blue against Linda Dallas, Nikolai Volkov against the Iron Sheik, Dominic DiNucci against Johnny Hotbody, Baron Von Raschke against Killer Kowalski, and the main event tag team match was Ken Patera and Jeff Buchantz, the mighty Maccabee, defeating Iron Mike Sharp and Iron Sheik, who did double duty that day. So I was at this mansion in Jersey at a WrestleMania party, doing the matches, and then everyone watched the matches afterwards. There's more of that on the next episode. I didn't get into a lot of the details from it, but there are also videotapes of this because he did this for several years. I think he did it for 3 or 4 year. And there was a DVD set that they've actually released, but it wasn't, for Maccabee. I believe it was called 4-volume set, Grandmasters of Wrestling First Blood. So, I mean, was the party, and I hung out with Nikolai, and and the wrestlers were there, Patera, and it was just kind of this big party I was invited to, and that's a story over there.
So it wasn't like you were just hanging out on the couch watching WrestleMania with.
Afterwards, after the afternoon show, yeah.
But yeah, but there
Watched
was a thing
WrestleMania
where we all
afterwards.
hung out. Yeah.
And we all hung out in this, giant TV screen at the time, which was kind of new and exciting to see, and watching WrestleMania and sitting next to Nikolai Volkov the whole time watching the show.
Nikolai. Dominic DeNucci is a cool one. Like, I don't feel like we hear enough stories about him. I know that
What
he
a great guy.
trained. Yeah, I mean, Foley puts him over every chance he gets. Obviously, he did a lot of training with Dominic. But he's one guy who I don't. Every time I hear him brought up, I light up because I'm all like, "Oh, here we go!" Like, we don't hear enough about him, so it's
No, we
cool
don't. And he was a tag team champion. He was one of Bruno Sammartino's dearest friends in Pittsburgh. Mainstay in the WWF for many years, and what a great guy! And very, very deep, thick Italian accent. And he was at my conventions. He showed up with Davey O'Hannon and Baron Cicluna. They just hung out at the convention. I think it was the year number 2 or 3, but they were there, and just great memories of Dominic DeNucci.
So good. Yeah, I'm looking at the list too, and I mean, yeah, I could see. I mean, there's a bunch of these people you would have run into a dozen times anyways. So
yeah,
they see you there. Of course, they're going to sit by you and talk.
No, I was there to do play-by-play, and it was I got paid for it and the whole thing, and it was very cool. And Mike and I just have remained friends, and Mike became like a senior VP at RCA Records, and he was the guy in control and who built the remarketing of the Elvis catalog.
Oh,
repackaging and putting box sets together and limited editions. Yeah, Mike did all of that. And then he started a company called Worldwide Entertainment Marketing and put out the Legends of Wrestling DVD and VHS sets with Buddy Rogers. I mean, he got the rights to these pristine old footage of these legends. And so there was like a 6-volume set of that. And Mike,
you know what year that was?
It was 1990.
So that was 20 years or so prior to the WWE. They were WWEM.
Yeah.
Marketing.
Worldwide Entertainment Marketing. Yeah.
Instead of World Wrestling Entertainment, Worldwide Entertainment. That's really close.
Yeah, pretty close.
That's neat.
Close.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
If they didn't have the M on the name, here's what's nuts. If they didn't have the M, then when WWF got sued by the World Wildlife Foundation, they wouldn't have been able to become the WWE.
Right. Because even the logo on those videotapes, they look kind of like a WWW Worldwide Entertainment. It was kind of a cool logo that they had on.
Yeah. That's so neat. That's that one detail. If it wasn't for the M, you know what I mean? That's cool.
Yeah. Hey, you learn a lot on this show, don't you? Especially when you start opening up the, opening up these stories and diving deep into them.
Yeah, and when you already know, as soon as you start hearing the clip that I'm about to ask you about something obscure and not the normal thing, I'm all like, "What's this, dude?" It says that DDP joined USA Championship Wrestling. What was that?
I don't know.
Because I thought he re-signed with WCW. Did he not? Did he go somewhere else first?
That's one of the things that kind of slipped my memory. I don't remember.
Yeah. I'm going to have to dig into that a little bit because he was just there, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Telling you that he was between contracts and he's seeing who's going to pay him the most money?
Well,
it wasn't WCW?
Because he worked. This is 93, right? So he went to work with AAA. He did my tour, IWS tour in June, July of 93, and then we got him right. Jake insisted that we use him for the AAA stuff as a second of his, and he got integrated into the AAA angles against Conan and Paraguayo and Cian Caras.
All right. I really like Donnie saying that he's going to carry your bag, and like, carry my bags, Donnie.
Donnie has always been like that. I mean, anything he could do for me, he was there, and he did it genuinely.
Oh yeah,
never looking for anything in return except for to be a part of it.
Just to be a part. I tell people that all the time. I think maybe that's why I connect with Don so much, is because I was the same way. Like, Sam Roberts was putting together Sam-a-mania for WrestleMania thing, and I was like, hey, if you need someone to grab coffees all day, I'm free. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't because I wanted Sam to buy me something. It was just, I want to help, man. I want to be a part of it. I want to be
part of
around,
it.
you know?
Yeah. Well,
You know?
that's kind of the way Donny was and is to this day in many respects.
Yeah. So I get it. I think it's great. And his energy. I'll just never get tired of it. Never get tired of it. Wally Carbo passed away due to a heart attack at 77. I was wondering if you had any stories about him at all, because it's not a name I'm familiar with.
No, he was a big promoter in, I believe it was AWA. He was like one of Vern's figurehead promoters, I believe. I believe that's where he's Minneapolis, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because he was a fixture in pro wrestling for a lot of years as like one of these old-time promoters.
Gotcha.
So it was either Detroit or Minneapolis.
I can look it up real fast because, I mean, I don't protest to be or profess to be some savant expert of it all.
He was a big wig, figurehead big wig.
It looks like it was Minneapolis area.
Yeah, that's my memory's correct. It has not lost. I have not lost that Wally Carbo memory of what he was.
Fantastic. Yeah, I heard it, made a note of it because I was like, I wonder if there's anything. I got another clip of after the capsule, you and Donny talk again, and there becomes a theme in this show about Backlund versus Razor Ramon.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was a really nice way to start that theme.
Yeah, excuse me, Don. Let me just get rid of the cigarette here. There we go. Yes, Mr. Ross's appearance on the actually WrestleMania tomorrow is not. It's really a surprise in a way because he really hasn't gotten a release from WCW. It's just they're like pushing Mr. Turner.
Another power play.
Another bullying tactic.
Oh, I love it. Love it.
I tell you, there's been a bevy of activity this week, also in Brooklyn, New York. I had a very interesting call from Mr. Jim Hellwig the other night, and apparently now they had the big Kerry Von Erich Memorial last night, the big tribute benefit show, and of course he's been prominently billed for that, and he just wanted me to tell the listeners out there that no one ever called him to invite him. So he probably was not there last night. But he was in New York for 3 days this week. And yes, it was under subpoena from the U.S. Justice Department with the ongoing investigation of the World Wrestling Federation. So he was in town for 3 days. Also, Rick Rude was in town this week as well. And I understand Jake Roberts was also talking to the folks in the Justice Department about this investigation. So while everyone's out in Las Vegas for the big show, there apparently was a big show in the U.S. Justice Department in the Eastern District Court this week.
Big chill.
I tell you, it's getting real interesting. And
John, I just watched the Weather Channel. It's 80 degrees in Las Vegas for today, and that's what they predict for tomorrow. So
and darkening clouds in Stamford over Titan Towers.
Thunder and lightning, like the old cartoons. There was the Addams Family or something like that. Let me ask you this: tomorrow on WrestleMania, Backlund and Ramon. How do you think that's going to end?
Backlund. That's my prediction.
You know, it's the guy's only WrestleMania. It's probably the only one that he'll ever be on, and I can't see Backlund doing a job. I think, call me sentimental or what, but I think it's something that's owed to him, and I hope he does go over.
I do too. But looking at the card tomorrow, it's we're going to be going over all our predictions tonight on the WEVD show at 11 o'clock. We'll be bringing on Dave Meltzer tonight, and we'll be going over the entire card of WrestleMania and all our predictions. But looking at it, it's really not an exciting lineup. There's really not too many major issues. Like there usually was a 6-month build-up for WrestleMania, and that didn't happen this year.
I think it's a lot had to do with the Hogan. I think was just thrown in there at so-called last minute. to maybe spruce up the lineup, because Bret Hart's a great worker. They've gotten Yokozuna over, but as I told you earlier this week, I don't know of any of the people that used to order WrestleMania that aren't the hardcore fan, that don't really go out of their way to watch it all the time. Nobody's really talking about WrestleMania. Even, surprisingly, with Hulk Hogan back, there's no scurry, no rush to call the cables that I have seen, or people even talking about it.
Yeah, and of course, as far as the celebrity tie-ins that usually have taken place, I haven't heard of one. I heard Rush Limbaugh's name bantered around, but I don't think that deal has even worked out.
Yeah, and if anybody does show up, I would think they would use somebody that's playing in Vegas now that could just scoot over and make an appearance, because anything else certainly would have been negotiated a long time ago, and they would have got the word out thinking that these people could draw some viewers.
And promote, and of course the WrestleMania parties are predominant now. People just get together to watch the show. It's like it is an event, and it is still the yearly big event in professional wrestling. But based upon the excitement of past years, this year there really is no big excitement for WrestleMania. Later on, we'll be taking your calls and comments to talk about the big show tomorrow and get some of your opinions and thoughts on WrestleMania. And Don, of course, tonight on WEVD, we will be speaking to you, and we will be rehashing the news capsule and going over some new developments maybe for the day. And always looking forward to bringing you on the big show tonight.
And you got to listen to J.J. Rougeau today. Stands for Jean-Jacques.
That's it. Jean-Jacques. Is that his?
Jean-Jacques. All righty. Have a good show, John. Talk to you tonight.
Take care, Don.
Bye now.
Yes. Nice conversation with the kid.
It's fantastic. So first off, Backlund and Razor, you guys were like, Backlund's got to win. It's his only Mania.
Yeah. Yeah. And I talk about this match more on the next program, because we go over the WrestleMania results, and I was quite disappointed with the results. But,
yep. As soon as I heard you, then we go into, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff, right? But at some point, a caller goes, "Hey, what do you think about Backlund?" He goes, "I want Backlund to win." You go, "Oh, me too, me too." Someone else calls in too, and they're like, "Hey, it would just be great to see Backlund have a great showing." And I was like, "What happened in that match?" It was a 4-minute match.
it was it was like a squash. Yeah.
It was a 4-minute match, under 4 minutes, defeated by a small package.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for next week to find out how well that was received by a whole episode where you guys just routinely go like, "He's good. They owe it to him. He's got to have it."
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I mean, you're not wrong. He's still one of the only people to hold the title as long as he did.
Yeah, that's
They
true.
talked about it this
But he did, this is, he does come back and, and does get gets his day in the sun again with Vince.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember because this was me as a child. This was my introduction to Bob Backlund.
Oh,
I thought he wasn't anything. I was like, "What is this loser?"
right. That's the way he
Poindexter.
Right, exactly. And then the whole gimmicks and the Mr. Backlund, I'm running for president. I mean, a very interesting individual, Mr. Backlund.
Yeah, and he's fantastic and amazing, and I know so much more about him now. But as a child, I remember hearing Pencil Neck Geek from Freddie Blassie, and thinking he was talking about guys like Bob Backlund.
Oh wow, yeah,
That
Bob
was the connection I had made as a kid.
He was always kind of a, he lasted a long time, but he was All-American boy, and to this day is probably the most bizarre interview I ever did at Tommy Fierro's WrestleCon, when I interviewed Bob, and he stood on his head and, wouldn't take questions and ran out of there with his shoes off and disappeared. I think it's up on YouTube somewhere. I don't know if it's not. I should put it up there.
Was he at the Starcast I was at? I was definitely at an event. Oh, no, it was the big event in New York.
Ah, Mr. Backlund was there?
Yes, because I walked by and there he was doing a handstand with a bunch of people recording it. And I was like, of course.
Yeah.
The dude's crazy. I love
Mr.
it.
Backlund, can I have your autograph? Can you name all the presidents in order?
So
No.
good.
No autograph.
What if I can name them all out of order? Not good enough.
That don't count.
The Kerry Von Erich Memorial. This is the first time you bring it up.
Yeah.
Jim Hellwig told you he was never called. He called you to tell your audience.
Yes.
He never got called.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, that's what I was probably referencing earlier when we were talking about it. That I know I had a conversation with him about it, and that was referenced there.
I think that you call him again later. But before we get to the next call, because it goes more into that specifically, the lack of hype for this WrestleMania, just across the board. There wasn't a lot of stuff. This was 9, I believe, right? Caesar's Palace. You said there was no celebrity tie-ins. I looked up to find out, are there celebrities I don't remember? There is a WWE.com site that they have their pages for celebrities at WrestleMania, and it lists every celebrity at each individual WrestleMania. That one, the only celebrity they listed was only one. Natalie Cole, Nat King Cole's daughter, had a front row seat.
Okay. And a lot of that had to do with them being not hip anymore, and with all the scandals that had taken place. And that's why celebrities were staying away from the brand. It was because of all the trouble that they had been in the press throughout 1992.
Yeah.
Who wanted to be associated with them, with, kitty sex scandals, the ring boy stuff, the steroid scandals, all of that negative publicity spilled over into the next year, where people were like, we don't want to be part of this.
I thought it was primarily the scandals too, but you also bring up a good point. They just didn't seem cool.
No, it was like attendance was down. Hogan was really over. It was like it wasn't Hulkamania anymore. And
yeah, it was. Oh, they're still doing Hogan.
Yeah, it wasn't cool to be associated with the WWF at that time.
Yeah. As I dug in a little bit deeper, I did find there were 2 appearances that could be associated as celebrity, and they cracked me up. It was Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. They had people dressed up.
Yeah.
And I was like, of course. But yeah, we did not end up with that. There was going to be no Farmingdale Lanes tonight, as you had other things to do, is all you said.
I was not enjoying my weekly bowling.
No, you're probably your ass.
They were sponsoring. They were sponsors, and it was a good concept, but it just wasn't something I looked forward to doing on the Saturday.
Do you remember losing to the kids a lot? Were the kids better than you at bowling?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, yeah. I was never the best bowler in the world, my friend. High at 220. I bowled 220 once. Yeah, I remember.
Oh, there you go.
I was on a bowling league with my sister and Bruce Jacobs and
that's cool.
My brother-in-law. Yeah, we used to bowl. We were in a league. Yeah,
just wasn't.
But I was never, I never just could, get it. My sister was a great bowler, but not me.
Cool. You did bring on Larry Dwyer, and I asked you before, who was Larry Dwyer? I have a drawing that's going to be here for the Larry Dwyer clip.
Okay.
So I was able to find out information about him, but I thought that you should tell people before you bring him on, because even in the clip, you don't say much. You're just like, longtime friend, Larry Dwyer. Do you want to tell us who he is before or after the clip?
Let's hear the clip, and then I'll kind of give a little bit of a intro to who Larry Dwyer was and is today.
Okay, back with the program, and we're going to bring on direct from the Texas area. Good friend of mine I've known for a long time, many years, Mr. Larry Dwyer. Larry.
How's it going, John?
Wake up.
I'm awake.
How you doing?
Oh, pretty good.
We go back. How many years, Larry?
Oh, shoot, I'd say probably about 20 years now. 20
years, and you moved to Texas. You've done some wrestling down there?
Mm-hmm. And Skandar Akbar broke me in about 14 years ago.
Long time. Mm-hmm. I remember those days at the Savoy near the Edison Hotel.
Yeah, there was a lot of memories there.
You were quite the wild man, as we all were back in our younger days.
Yeah, I think we've all slowed down a bit since then.
Yes, I know. I can't even walk, let alone drink anymore. Last night, the Kerry Von Erich I guess, benefit for his daughters took place at the either the Global Dome or the Sportatorium?
Well, it's now called the Sportatorium again. They don't have any affiliation with as being referred to as the GWF anymore. When Max Andrews pulled out with his syndication company, they also just stopped using that name.
Okay.
So they still call it the GWF, but they don't call the Sportatorium the Global Dome anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That just went out with Joe Pedicino and them.
Okay, but last night was the card, and there were a lot of big names advertised. I know Jim Hellwig, the man formerly known as the Ultimate Warrior, called me this week and said he didn't even know about the card. No one had even bothered to pick up the phone and tell him about it.
Yeah, there was a little confusion there. I didn't see him personally. That they wouldn't allow anybody except the wrestlers on the card that night in the dressing room, period. Because there was so many different people flown in or whatever. Actually, the security there has gotten, justifiably tighter over the years. So it's just, if you're not on the card, it isn't like you can just go in and visit and say hi to people, which would have been, which is unfortunate because I would have liked to have said hi to about a dozen people I haven't seen in years last night, you know?
Yeah.
But it's also understandable with all the, it just creates too much havoc back there.
But as far as any site, any word of Sid Vicious showing up, he was also advertised.
Vicious was announced, and they even announced him right before the card started. They announced most of the card, but they didn't mention anything about the Warrior being there. In fact, on the tape that goes on the recording, if you call there from for ticket information, had announced him as the Dingo Warrior against Black Bart.
Yeah.
And but as the last I heard, I spoke to one of the referees before I had to leave last night, and he said that the Warrior had not shown up at all.
Well, of course, he was in New York for 3 days this week, talking to the Justice Department. But that's one thing that, because he was on my program up, the WEVD Pro Wrestling Spotlight program several weeks ago, and he wanted to put something together for Kerry's daughters, and he would have certainly participated in this event, but he said he was not called at all. I was the first to inform him.
I think it was just a lack of communication there because. Yeah. But I was in the impression it was originally his idea, and I guess it was just probably on his part. He thought it was left in the idea stages. I don't think anybody got back to him on it. As that's the feeling I got on it. Yeah,
well, that's just certainly because it looks as though, let's say last night with all the advertising, that the fans in the Texas area, and I'm sure all the newsletters will be talking about, him not showing, no showing this big event, but. He wasn't called.
No, I think it was a miscommunication there because he was a very good friend of Kerry's. And he went to his funeral on his own expense. I don't see why it would kill him for plane fare to come in and do a benefit either.
Yeah, we're going to try to reach him and try to talk to him tonight on the program about that because I just don't feel that he should get any negative publicity because of it.
No, but, how many other people that probably could have but didn't show up for his funeral? Yeah, and look who did. So that says something right there how close they were. So I'd hate to see him get a bad rap for no showing a show he wasn't aware of.
It's a lot there, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a lot there because it seems like he was so involved in it, and yet somehow he had no idea when it was actually occurring, and it just happened to be occurring the same exact time as a trial, but he still didn't find out until you called him. Like you barely got those words out, but you had said he didn't find out about it till I told him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seemed like a cluster F of this entire thing, and because I knew Larry, I knew that he was a big part of the Texas scene. He was a referee for WCCW, and so that's why I called him to see what type of report I can get and try to get a backstory from Larry Dwyer.
And this also felt to me, we talked about it before with your Jake interview even. You were trying to protect Warrior here a little bit. You didn't want him to get a bad rap here when you thought that. Yeah, because you were going to be using him later, right?
Yeah, I was wanting to have him as a headliner on my tour, Southeast Asia.
I'm not saying that like swayed you or anything like that, but
no, I mean, you got to believe the guy, right? You got to believe him
Yeah.
when he said he didn't know anything about it. But then you never know. Like even 30 years later, you never know. I mean, I was just trying to get to the bottom of it,
yeah,
and I
which
had
that was actually a nice thing.
yeah, and I was at that point, because I was never a fan of Warrior when he was in WWF. I mean, I never liked the gimmick or the ring work, or he went over with the kids and he was a huge monster star. My goodness.
Yeah.
But I was never really a fan of what he brought to the business when it comes to being a wrestler. But he was a draw, big one. He knew how to drew money. And once I started conversing with him and had him on the show and heard how authentic and genuine he seemed to me at the time,
yeah,
and then it kind of turned really fast when I made him a really decent offer, $25,000 to go over to Southeast Asia, and he accepted. And then he changed it and said, "I want 50," and then we're close. He didn't sign his contract, and then he said he wanted 100,000, and we sold the tour for 250. So that would have not been possible, and told him to go F himself and hung up on him.
Yeah.
In my lawyer's office, Ron Scholar, while Jake and Diamond Dallas Page were in the lobby hearing the conversation, and then that's when Jake held me up for more money.
Well, because so if Jake heard that, so he knows you've just freed up some money.
Jake,
he's not paying Warrior?
You were paying that son of a bit, and he didn't like Warrior anyway, and I was pitting them against each other in the main event.
Wow.
You were gonna pay that son of a bitch $50,000, and that's when that's when he said, "I'm not going until I get X."
And then you're just like, no, it's not.
Well, I mean, I had it, or else he wasn't going. He thought it was working. He probably would have won anyway, but he tried to hold me up on Southeast Asia anyway. When we were there, he wanted to hold me up for more money. Yeah,
it's insane.
There are some nice people in the business. We're talking all kinds of nice situations today.
I was just telling my fiance about stuff that happened at a recent thing that I was at, that behind the scenes stuff. And I was like, oh, this, and this happened. And now they're doing this, and this. And she's all like, she's got her master's degree in HR. And she goes, well, I mean, once it's in writing, like you can't change any of that stuff. And I was like, this is a different kind of business.
Right.
I was like, this is what makes the wrestling business so fascinating.
Nothing means anything.
Is exactly. And I was like, the wrestling business is fascinating to guys like the Conrad Thompsons who have such a deep-rooted business sense that they hear about the stuff that happened in the wrestling world and they go, wait, what? You just did that? Like, it's insane. It's so crazy. It's interesting. It's fascinating because you go, wow, okay.
That is correct.
But I did think it was really nice of you to go out of your way to be all like, look, he didn't no-show for no reason.
Right.
There was a massive miscommunication one way or the other.
Yeah, because I knew when he was on the show, it was like, I want to do something for Kerry's kids.
Yeah.
That was the premise. He wanted to do something.
Yeah. And on top of that, I also thought that it was great that it was like, if you didn't know, you didn't know. Like, you went out of your way to make sure that people didn't think that he just didn't show. He wanted to be a part of that. You didn't want people to think that he was lying about being close and all that stuff. Like, it was a really cool thing that you took the time to do that and get somebody involved in that like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You also set a rumor straight. There was an April Fool's joke going around in some of the hotlines and newsletters that Terry Bam Bam Gordy had passed away. You said it was a sick April Fool's joke that did not happen. You guys had gotten him on the phone or something.
Yeah. He was alive.
That stuff happens every year still, and I don't get it. Wouldn't it be a great April Fool's joke if we fooled people into thinking someone who's dead who's not? Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre shit, man.
People are so weird. I clipped a little bit of the Mountie because I thought it was kind of neat. You guys got the Mountie for some reason.
That was where you had the kid in the background. It was like,
yes,
there was this kid in the locker room.
JJ.
I
hearing the kids so much in there, and at one point it's like, JJ, grab my socks.
Yeah.
Can you put my socks in my bag, JJ? And like Donnie's just sitting there, just like waiting for this kid to put the guy's socks away.
Yeah.
I had to look up. I was like, did the Mountie's son ever become a wrestler? Because if that JJ kid is out and about, I want him to hear this. I couldn't find anything about his kid, so I didn't dig extensively, but I couldn't find anything about it.
If they want to hear it, I mean, it's up on Patreon, the entire episode. Yeah. You can relive the Mountie talking to his son throughout an entire interview that Donnie's trying to do with this guy.
Yeah, I do have a few minutes of it because I did think if you want to listen to it,
I think we should play a clip of it. Sure.
You asked him specifically about Donnie asked him specifically about Andre and Dino passing away because they were all from the same area, and I just liked his responses to that. And right before he gets into that, he does talk a little bit about why he left the WWF, which I also thought was interesting too.
Mm-hmm. Let's hear it.
What we're going to do now is we're going to go to the interview Donny Laible conducted with Jacques Rougeau, the man called the Mountie, and we're going to go to that interview right now, then we'll take your calls here at the show.
First thing, here we are with the Mountie, Jacques Rougeau. Jacques, for the wrestling fans that have missed you since you've left the World Wrestling Federation, what have you been keeping busy with?
I've been keeping busy with my family most of the time. Is dedicated to my new child, who is 3 weeks old, and JJ here is with me now. Say hi, JJ.
Hi, JJ.
3.5 years old. That's what I've been doing with myself, really.
Enjoying yourself a little off the road.
Let's just say after 7 years of traveling 25 days a month, 12 months a year, it's time to realize that there's a family there and there's other things in the world than wrestling.
Now, let me ask you this. In the past few years, basically since 84, 85, WWF went national. Little by little, the promotions dried up, and in Canada we had international. Why is it now, do you think, that Canada does not have basically a promotion of its own, that it relies on the WWF traveling through to different cities?
Well, I think because wrestling is like a cycle. It goes good for a while, then it dies for a while, then it goes good for a while. Now, the other problem that's coming up in Montreal right now, I'll just speak for my home, is that the school teachers have made a lot of power moves to take wrestling off TV because it was bad for the kids, it was too violent, and they succeeded in that in Montreal. So there's no French station right now that has wrestling on, which most of the population is French. So that has something to do with it, I'm sure. The other reasons, Vince McMahon came into Montreal, and he took all the talent away. In every big city, not only Montreal, he went around and he took the cream of the crop everywhere, and that left the sponsors and the owners of the organizations that were local suffer a little bit.
Speaking of, talking about the talent leaving, recently, the past few months, wrestling lost two greats, several people, but two from Canada. We had Dino Bravo and Andre the Giant. What are some of your opinions on them and your early recollections of Andre, who came, into Montreal back in the early 70s, and basically Dino started there as well?
Well, let's start with Andre. I think he was one of the greatest assets in this business as far as bringing crowds to the arenas, just being a specimen of his own. We owe, I think everybody in the wrestling owes him respect. And I used to play a lot of cribbage. I don't know if you're aware of that game, cribbage. But me and Andre used to play almost every night in the dressing room. Out of all the guys that were in the dressing room, it was me and Andre that got together and played that game. So I was pretty close to Andre. I felt pretty bad about it. But I know personally, being around him so much, that he also was very unhappy in life because he felt like he was an attraction in a zoo everywhere he went. And it's after a while, I guess, he drank his problem away. And well, what can you say? I mean, the guy, I understand how he felt. I probably would have done the same. I may not have been as good as he has about the situation because he was just like we could call a freak in a way, but he knew that. And I owe the world to him, and I was on a lot of wrestling cards where they were sold out because of him. So I just have the greatest respect for him. As far as Dino Bravo goes, he was from Montreal. He was from Montreal, but we never really associated together as far as friends because there was 2 organizations at a time, Grand Prix Wrestling, which he was part of, and then my uncle and my father was part of another one. So there's nothing bad to say against a man who's left us. I will just say that I regret his wife and his daughter, that's 6 years old, that is left behind by himself. I think that's something that could be avoided. Shouldn't happen to anybody.
Now, you're talking earlier about your father and your uncle. For some of the current wrestling fans who don't know, your father Jacques and your uncle Johnny were wrestlers. What are they doing? And we know Raymond is somewhat involved with the WWF still.
Yeah, Raymond actually took me and Gene Okerlund's place, and my uncle Johnny, he died 10 years ago from cancer, and my father is still living right now. He spent 6 months a year in Miami, and he's kind of retired now. He saved his money, and he has a good life, and he's looking at all us grow up with all our grandchildren. So he spends the other 6 months up in Rawdon, which is an hour north of Montreal, which we all live there, the family, the 5 kids and the 2 parents. We all live there within 2 miles of all the houses. So it's great.
Close family?
Very close. Very, very.
Yeah, it was just nice. You don't see a lot of Mountie interviews in general.
No, there aren't hardly any out there, really.
Yeah, and he just sounded like such an easily approachable guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was just happy to talk about it.
Yeah, never knew him personally. Never really had any interaction with him other than this interview that Don did.
And then after that, on the Patreon, even Donnie rapid fires him a bunch of old classic Canadian wrestlers, guys I hadn't really heard of, and I had to Google and look at. I was like, that's kind of cool, but it was kind of rapid fire. Oh, say something about Hans Schmidt, and he goes oh, he's a really nice guy. He's retired now. And he's okay, we'll say something about this guy. Firing through him.
Donnie always did his research
for sure. But I just thought it was nice. I thought it was cool. Mountie saying something nice about Andre. He talked about playing cribbage with Andre, and I just thought that was funny because when I was at the CAC, they had a whole cribbage tournament.
Yes.
And I have a feeling he has something.
Big in the wrestling business with boys from years ago.
Did you ever play cribbage? You ever get good at it?
No.
It's because you weren't in the locker room very long, huh?
No, I mean, I just was never into board games.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, I don't even know if it's a board game. I don't even know what cribbage is to this day, really. If you look at I really don't.
I don't get the rules at all, but it is like a big board with pegs and stuff. It doesn't seem like the easiest thing to carry with you. Yeah. Like a deck of cards, I get. People say they play poker in the back, totally makes sense.
Right.
But you're putting together cribbage? Maybe if you had beaten Dusty, you'd have gotten better at cribbage.
Maybe. Could have been. It could have been a lost skill that I might have excelled in. I could have been a champion. I could have got that award at the CAC.
Could have beaten Bob Orton.
Yeah.
You didn't get very many callers in, to be honest.
Yeah.
The show kind of was, I don't know, it felt well paced, but there was a lot there. It was dense almost,
Yeah, it was busy but dense, like my brain sometimes.
Oh, that makes sense. Howard called in. He wants Bob Backlund to go over big. He was asking about and you did too. You're like, oh, Bob Backlund's got to win. He's got to win.
Yeah.
And
is that Howard from Dix Hills?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a guy that was a CPA in Dix Hills, and Howard was also involved in Weekend of Champions 1991.
No kidding.
Yeah, he was one of the financial backers.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah, he asked about the Hall of Fame, if he thought Andre being put in the Hall of Fame was a move against the NWA, or if it was going to be a regular thing. And you said, I think it's going to become a regular thing, and it did. And then he asked you, why are the wrestlers all wet?
Yeah, why they wet their hair before they go out?
It's funny. And you go, that's a great question. I clipped all of the callers. I just don't know if I want to play them all. We're gonna play.
You got a good one though. I think we're gonna listen to from what we discussed beforehand.
Yeah, that one's next up after Pat. So let's play the Pat from Hicksville because I thought this was interesting too.
Okay.
This has to do with your Tonight Show that never aired, and I'm gonna want to know if you talked about it or not. But Pat,
I'm gonna speak to Pat from Hicksville. Pat, are you there?
John.
Hey, Pat.
Let's see. In that suit that you said that Jake and the Warrior was subpoenaed, was that a suit brought by the WWF?
No. That is it's been an ongoing investigation from the U.S. Justice Department, a federal investigation on the WWF.
Our tax dollars finally at work.
Well, it's been going on for almost a year now. And it certainly seems to have picked up steam over the last couple of months. My estimation, talking to different individuals, is that they have interviewed and talked to well over 100 people on this investigation, and it stemmed starting from the Saharian trial in '91, and then, of course, the sex scandals from last year. It was in conjunction with a Pennsylvania prosecutor by the name of Theodore Smith, who prosecuted Saharian. He was a federal prosecutor, and then they tied it into to New York with the Eastern District Court of New York, and it's been ongoing. There's been a serious investigation taking place. We're going to really be getting into that tonight on the program with Dave Meltzer. A number of us have been real hesitant to talk about it, but it really has picked up steam, and with guys being subpoenaed, I was at a show last Saturday in Staten Island, and the feds were there handing subpoenas out.
Well, sounds like good news. Maybe the biggest heel will finally take a fall.
Well, that remains to be seen what's going to happen, but we'll be following that very, very closely here at this program, and, of course, the WEBD program Saturday nights.
And just as a sideline, on Channel USA, they showed a match from WrestleMania 1, Big John versus Andre the Giant.
Oh, really?
Really? So I hope you had your machine on this time.
No, I don't tape that Mania show on Saturday morning.
Well, it was something to see.
Was it? Yeah, I have that on tape. That very first WrestleMania was such an air of excitement, and it was a very exciting show.
Well, I certainly won't be buying this one, but we'll get to see it somehow.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, thanks. Good talking to you, John.
Take care, Pat.
Did you guys dive into that court case? Did you guys finally feel open enough?
I don't know if it happened that night because I don't have the tape.
Could have got cold feet still.
I don't know if we did or not. I mean, Meltzer was on. It could have very well happened, especially with people being called into New York to appear in front of a grand jury.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier Jim Hellwig, Rick Rude, Jake the Snake were all subpoenaed. You were at a show in Staten Island and saw people getting subpoenaed? Do you have any recollection of that?
I really don't. If I said it, it had to happen, but I don't have any personal recollection in my memory. From
I'm sure it wasn't a big show. It wasn't like some big, hey, come here to get your subpoena and fireworks going off.
I mean, they were out there subpoenaing people. And, of course, you know, when we had that unexpected call when Terry Funk was on with Conan, when Honky Tonk Man called in, and he had been subpoenaed and was in New York testifying in front of the grand jury. So yeah, I mean, all kinds of stuff was going on. They were getting serious about what was about to happen to the Teflon Don, Mr. McMahon.
And we know by the end of the story, the quote, maybe the biggest heel will finally take the fall. Well, of course he does. The heel always loses.
Not in this case.
No.
And look where he is now, $9.3 billion of valuation later.
You know, it's almost like, you know, in cartoons, how sometimes like they'll take the brain out of a villain and put it in like a robot version of them.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we're so close to that with the visual look of Vince, that he looks almost like he's a robot of himself.
Well, yeah. Hey, but artificial intelligence, I mean, who knows? Take the brain out and put him in give him a better face.
That's what I'm saying. Robots are still tough, so, you know, got to fix it. But I think Vince would like to be a robot because he could do more push-ups than ever.
Yeah. And he'll last forever. Like, he doesn't want to die.
Yeah. But I thought it was cool. It was cool that you were at a show where they were getting the subpoenas and stuff.
Yeah.
And
I wish I could remember. I wish I could remember specifically what it was about. I mean, but like I said, it's jars the memory when I hear these things back, but I can't recall that situation.
To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if it was strictly a show where you saw one person come up and give a subpoena to Jake, and you generalized it, so it didn't sound so specific.
Perhaps that could be the answer.
Could be. And it's funny you brought up the Terry Funk thing, because at WrestleCon I saw Honky Tonk. I was so close.
No kidding.
Honky Tonk is a moron.
He'd be an interesting guest.
I think he'd be fun, especially from that one. I mean, it was so cool. But I didn't know how I could approach him with, hey, I work with John Arezzi, and we listened to Terry Funk call you a moron. It was hysterical. How you doing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm already awkward.
That wouldn't have not gone over.
Yeah. He'd be like, tell you what, I'm going to kick the shit out of you right now.
But we always had a great relationship.
Yeah. Super nice guy. I've heard nothing bad about him.
Yeah.
You did a Mickey B read, putting him over. And then we get one of my favorite comebacks of the year. Joey from North Babylon calls in.
Yes.
So excited. I heard we're going to Joey from North Babylon. I immediately paused the thing, got everything in place, because I was like, all right, this is a clip no matter what else happens. It might be the first clip I made of the whole show. Sometimes I listen and then go back and clip, but there's certain moments where you go, nope, you're keeping
That's a keeper right from the start, right? When you see it, when you hear it, then you got to keep it, especially this dude.
Joey from North Babylon is next. Joey, hello.
Hey, John, you there?
Yes, I'm here, Joey. How are you?
Yeah, a long time. You're a hard man to get a hold of.
Yeah, how are you doing?
All right, what time's that other show on tonight?
11 o'clock.
All right.
11 o'clock, 10:50 a.m., WEVD out of New York City.
Yeah, we won't miss it. Listen.
No, you better not.
A couple other questions. I noticed on WCW that Jim Ross isn't there. What's going on with him?
Oh, Jim Ross is with the WWF now.
I don't even know that.
Well, he starts tomorrow. Didn't you listen to the beginning of the show?
No, as a matter of fact, I just woke up, but I said I got to tell him the Pro Wrestling Spotlight.
That's right. First thing you do in the morning.
Another question I had. Do you think the Horsemen will be back together again?
Yes, I do.
And who do you think the Horsemen will be comprised of?
Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, maybe Tully Blanchard they're talking to about coming back, and Ole Anderson, perhaps.
I think Ole has history as far as wrestling. I think they should try to get back with Barry Windham.
Yeah, that would be great, but...
the way I look at it, I think Windham and Flair are going to lock up.
Windham and Flair will definitely be locking up, and that's why with Tully possibly coming back now, and Arn and Rick, they're all going to be baby faces. They won't be heels anymore, so it'll be a clean-cut version of the Horsemen. I still think they should bring Cactus Jack in as the man who puts his life on the line.
Well, I'd like to see Rick Rude in there, too.
That would be great.
Or, I was thinking of another thing, maybe possibly Ric Flair, Anderson, Arn, and Stunning Steve and Flying Brian.
Yeah.
As I remember Anderson mentioned them, yeah.
Well, I really think that the Horsemen will be feuding with Pillman and Austin and Windham. I think there's going to be a big summer feud involving all those guys.
Well, you think Barry Windham will be a good guy?
No, Barry will not be a good guy, no.
Well, but listen, I really like Windham. I think he's a sensational wrestler. And I'm glad he's finally got a major belt, and I hope he keeps it a long time.
Yeah, he'll keep it as long up until Flair wrestles him in June, I believe.
Well, we'll see what happens.
Okay, Joey.
Take care.
Take care now. I guess Joey is a Barry Windham fan.
Joey. I love Joey, man.
He's one of my absolute favorites. If anyone knows who Joey from North Babylon is, I want him on the show.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, hey, John, long time no talk. Hey, you're a hard man to get a hold of. He's like the typical Italian, New York. And it's so funny. I brought up Cactus Jack there probably for a reason, looking back at it, because he had this big fight with Cactus on the air, like one of Cactus's early appearances. But Joey is radio gold.
If I didn't know the nature of your actual show, I would think that he was made up. He's just such a cartoonish kind of sound. It's amazing.
Yes. And then I used to play off of him. I used to try to keep him on as long as possible. Keep this guy talking. Keep this guy talking. I never wanted to hang up on him.
Well, if it also wasn't for the fact I lived in New York and didn't know these people exist, I would think that this was just like Animaniacs. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it was just amazing. And it just, So good. I like the way he talked about it. Oh, the guy's a sensational wrestler, man. I just hope he keeps it. And then just like, oh, we'll see what this is. Well, we'll see how it goes. Time will tell. You know what I mean? Like,
Ole Anderson is old news.
Yeah. So good.
I am the dean of wrestling. Classic.
I hope that he went on to become a big promoter. What if it turns out that was Joey Styles?
Oh, imagine. It wasn't Joey for sure.
Goes to a dialect coach or something. You know. But yeah, and then you only had 2 more callers. You had Bob from Pleasant Point, which I'm about to play.
Yeah.
But just to get it out of the way, the call after that was just Steve from West Hampstead. Yeah. He was asking what was going to go on with JR's show, and you tell him, hey, he's going to be a WWF program now. And then he asked what's going on with Sean Mooney, and then you said you heard he auditioned for WCW, and again, I just like hearing Sean Mooney being passed around. Mm-hmm. But this is Bob from Point Pleasant. My favorite part is how this clip ends, so this is why we have it.
And we may even try to get a hold of Mr. Hellwig, and so he could personally talk to the fans about the reason why he did not appear last night at the Kerry Von Erich benefit for Kerry's daughters, because he was not called. We're going to get Bob from Point Pleasant on. Bob, you're next.
Hi, John. How you doing?
I'm okay, Bob. How are you?
Pretty good. How true is it true that Sid Vicious and Hawk might be going to WCW?
Hawk has had a meeting with Ole Anderson, and Sid has received a contract from WCW, and talking to someone very close to Sid this week. He hasn't signed it yet. So I don't know what he's holding up for. Maybe he got that urge to play softball again this summer. But he has not signed a contract that was offered to him yet. Maybe he's just independently. He's just very wealthy, and he doesn't need the wrestling business.
Yeah, maybe. Did you hear about any matches being batted around for Slamboree or whatever?
There could be all those old-timers competing in the tag team matches. And as far as the main event goes, no, I do not know the lineup yet.
Is it just going to be all old-timers?
No, it's not. They'll have other matches as well.
Oh, and how do you think Jim Ross will fit into the circus atmosphere of WCW?
Well, if he wears a toga tomorrow, as everyone else is supposed to on that show, then we'll see how he'll be fitting in. Hopefully he'll be able to fit into his toga.
All right, John, you got a great show.
Thanks a lot. Bye. Jim Ross, that's right, and the man who never really wanted anything to do with the WWF, has Vince McMahon on his program last Sunday, and says that his radio show will now be a WWF type of program. Can you believe it? Can you really believe that? I find it hard to fathom that this is all has happened. And wow, that's all I can say is wow. WWF now will be probably the predominant sponsor of that radio show on Sunday nights. So they wanted a WWF radio show. They finally got one.
Yeah. Yeah, I was right. He wore the toga.
You did. You say you'll find out if he fits into the toga. And you're right. The first time we see him, he's in a toga.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then, of course, they were talking about Slamboree, that caller.
Yep.
And Slamboree was their kind of first attempt to do almost like a Weekend of Champions type of convention. They brought in a lot of legends for autograph signings and stuff like that. So, yeah, my concepts were, we're going to do, companies were going to try to do bigger and better. And, WWF with fan access and all. Yeah, it was like interesting stuff to listen to.
Yeah, and I thought it was neat, too. They were referring to them as old-timers, where I much prefer, as much as people hate a lot of Vince McMahon's branding of stuff, Legends is much more preferable than old-timer.
Yes. I'm sure the boys like to be called Legends rather than old-timers. Yeah. I don't like being called an old-timer, and I'm an old-timer now.
When do you get to the point of being an icon? Is that an age thing too, or?
Well, my client John Gibbons is an icon up in Canada. He's not that old. I mean, it's like it depends on how you are portrayed for the accomplishments and the legacy that you leave.
Yeah, I guess it's a big difference too. Yeah, legend and icon based on your specific contributions. But definitely better than old timer either way.
Well, iconic, being an icon or iconic is just a level above everything else, man.
Yes. Yeah.
Bruno Sammartino is an icon.
Yes, he's definitely above a legend for sure.
Yeah.
The only thing I didn't actually end up playing was before Howard's call. It cracked me up. You said that no one was lighting up the phones and you weren't going to talk until someone did. And then you had like 10 or 15 seconds of dead air where you waited and you go, okay, let's lit up. So I'll keep talking. And then you talked about something else before taking the call. So good. So good. But that's it. That was our show 205.
Awesome. There's a long one.
Yeah. But there's a lot of good stuff, man. A lot of meat.
Yeah. We have a fascinating show. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on here, and that's why we do what we do, you know. And people, you know, they listen to it, and sometimes they have to listen to it over a day or two. But we don't do that often. We usually are pretty tight, you know.
Yeah, we keep it tight. And to be honest, it's so much fun and so good that, like, I did the best I could not to talk the last 2 days just to make sure I'd be ready for today to be able to get through, because I didn't want to miss this and I didn't want to push it off. I didn't want to make you try and do it on your own or some weird
You better
thing.
save up that voice for next episode.
I mean, I don't know if I have to. If it's going to be you and Medusa, I might not have room to talk, if I'm being honest.
I might actually have you do the interview.
Yeah, just you step out.
And you review the show with her.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait for it, actually, because, you know, Deborah's interesting. She's great. Yeah. She's iconic. She's iconic. She is iconic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
My goodness, her accomplishments and what she did for women's wrestling and the wrestling industry. My goodness, I can't wait to bring her on. And we talk, you know, a few times a week. She calls me up for morning coffee. Morning coffee while she's walking Daisy.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
yeah. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. You know, the friendship has been a long one. I mean, and that was really the first time I had her on the show, which is going to be reviewed next week. And I was always in awe of her back then, as I am today. Still.
Yeah, it's amazing. The stuff that she's accomplished.
Yeah.
That, I mean, she's done so much that people aren't even fully aware of what she's done.
Right. That's why the book, that's why Woman Who Would Be King, the Medusa story, for our YouTube viewers, it's right here. And it's a fabulous book. Yeah. And I love what she wrote. You know, it's like, John, this book doesn't happen without you. My sanity has never been the same. Your pal.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm so happy for her, and I'm so happy for Greg Oliver, who did the book with her, because he's got Greg Oliver between this book and this one, the Gibby book that came out, the John Gibbons story, Tales of a Baseball Lifer, is out, and it's going to be on the Canadian bestseller list this weekend when the first report comes out, and it's outselling Prince Harry's book up there. Right,
that's fantastic. And even at WrestleCon, guys like Keith Greenberg came by, and we're talking about how nice Greg was, and how happy he was that Greg was a part of that book and stuff.
Oh my goodness, yeah, Greg deserved it, man. And Greg has written so many books now, but these two are his biggest, his highest profile books of his illustrious career, and he's had 19 books out.
Wow, it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Yes, it is. But anyway, Marsh, I want you to rest up, feel better, because man, I know what you're going through when you're sick and you got to talk. It's not a good situation, and you travel LA, all this WrestleMania, all the work. You almost cut your finger off, all of that stuff that you had to go through.
Yeah,
I'm happy that you're here with us, and I appreciate you as I always do. Let everybody know where they could find you out there and your projects that you work on, not just your social media, but tell us, more about what you're doing.
Yeah, actually, right now, I mean, obviously, John Arezzi Pro Wrestling Spotlight on YouTube. You can find me at Ref Marsh on Twitter, Marsh Ref on Instagram, WrestlingOnTheRocks.com for my own personal hangout where I just like to drink and talk wrestling with my friends and just kind of get into the weeds of it, because it's fun. Sometimes it's fun to break it apart and not mean it in a mean way or have to call people names, like Medusa's thing, Nick Hausman, or YouTube.com/Queen of Carnage for all the Medusa's podcasts, Paving the Way, Trash Talk, And Nick Hausman just launched House of Wrestling, and I've started helping him out with some of his graphics as well. So a lot of his visuals and stuff I've been able to help him out with. He helped me get my start. I wouldn't have been here with you if he didn't bring me on to X-Pac.
Yeah.
Nick introduced, not only did he introduce me to X-Pac, but then when X-Pac decided to stop doing his podcast, Nick and X-Pac both were like, let's help John.
Right. Yeah. Because it was X-Pac, Sean was involved with that as well.
Yeah.
Because initially, I don't know how many people even know this, but, they were supposed to be the executive producers of the show.
Yeah. That was the whole thing.
Then Sean stopped, and then Nick was like, I can't do it. I'm sorry, and then he introduced me to you. And
yeah. And at that time, I was their video editor, and I was going to stay the video editor for them and take over and kind of be for you. And then when, like you said, when X-Pac stopped, it was all like, okay, but still, can you introduce me to John? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
he just kind of kept things rolling. So yeah, I wouldn't be working with Medusa if I didn't know you, and I wouldn't be working with you if I didn't work for Sean, and I wouldn't be working for Sean if it weren't for Nick. So I'm happy to help Nick launch his new platform.
Of course.
So there's that as well. But outside of that, yeah, that's kind of all the big stuff.
You're busy, man. Yeah. And congratulations on the recent engagement.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, my friend. We'll talk to you next week. And everybody out there, that's going to wrap up this edition of John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight. Look for our private group at facebook.com/Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast and radio show. We have a public page to share wrestling history. Matt Memories also on Facebook. There's a private group there as well. I really implore you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Pro Wrestling Spotlight. Follow me on Twitter at John Arezzi, Instagram at John Arezzi as well. And don't forget to check out our sister podcast, Matt Memories from Madison Square Garden, covering all the shows I covered from the Mecca of all arenas 50 years ago. New episode being taped this week, which covers the April 30th, 1973 show at Madison Square Garden, where Pedro Morales fought Don Leo Jonathan. And Matt Memories from Madison Square Garden is co-hosted by Tim Poutre, written and researched by Richie Garcia. I want to thank our special executive producers on this program, our Patreon executive producers, Anthony Pyrus and Joe Holloway. And I want to thank every one of the patrons for your support, helping with the production costs for this show. Until next week, when we relive more history with Medusa, this is John Arezzi for the Pro Wrestling Spotlight.